Hello, I hope I'm live now. Give me some feedback. Can you hear me well? Is there any echo, any hiss, any other problems? I'm gonna wait until there's a comment, and if everything's fine, we're gonna start with our annual vocal cover analysis live stream. The first time I did this one, it took me 2.5 hours to get through all of the covers. Last time, it took me over 4 hours, I think. Let's see how long it will take today. Still waiting for feedback in the chat. One, two, three. Hello, hello, hello. Anyone there? Great. So, let's start. The first vocal cover I've released this year was Architect's Doomsday, featuring my student Darius on guitars and overall production. And I'm just gonna skip through this thing. Hope you can hear this. If there's any sound problems, just tell me.
How it frozen over, the cold still burns underneath my.
What we have here is very calm verse. We have a couple of little subtle effects like creaking, even if it's just the onset. We do have also some delayed onsets, where you hear a bit of airs passing the vocal folds already before the phonation sets in. It's not just a normal aspirate onset like but it's and it's like the sound wants to come, but I'm not allowing it yet. It sounds a bit like I'm hoarse. If you listen to the original, Sam Carter has the same sound there. I suppose that also in his case it's not actual hoarseness, but an expressive tool where you kind of sabotage your phonation in a way that raises the phonation threshold pressure and also the time until phonation actually starts, like by a split second. Instead of or ha, we have ha, something like this, and it sounds just like there's a bit of swelling on the vocal folds. Now, what we have here is basic hypercompressed distortion. It is not extremely loud. Of course, it is louder than the very quiet verse, but it sounds much more powerful, especially to someone who hasn't experienced this technique in their own bodies or in the same room with the singer yet. I would say I'm at roughly volume 5 out of 10, maybe 6. You could probably push it up to 7. But compared to non-hypercompressed distortion at that range, it's really nothing. I hope this didn't clip too hard. If there's any sound problems, just tell me, and I'll try to get rid of them. Now, what happens after that? Our first hypercompressed scream. We have not only the false folds, but also now a bit of creaking on the true fold level. But in the hypercompressed context. And that makes for a pretty brutal scream. it's not an atonal scream. It allows me to move melodically. They say the god died! But it's not pure distortion either. That would sound like, they say the god! That's not what I'm doing. Doesn't sound metal enough, you know? God! That's more the direction we want to go in. Does Sam Carter use the same exact technique in the original? I doubt it. I don't really hear any compression with him. Maybe there's a bit of it, but I'm pretty certain it's not hyper compressed like the way I'm doing it. Why am I using hyper compressed distortion and hyper compressed fry scream if that's not what I suppose he is using in the original? Well, ironically, because that is how I get closest to his sound color. If I use medium fry scream without any compression, wow! That's a typical problem. I talked about this in previous live streams. I tend to be very bright. And by the way, even brighter, twangier, nastier when I try to make it more noisy. I can then, of course, darken in another place. For example, by doing this. But, you know, it's not very stable. I'm still not nearly as dark and as thick sounding as he is. And it's so much easier for me to just, you know, make that sound with a bit of compression. The compression makes me less dependent on twang. And, well, you could probably learn to be more independent or at least more flexible in a non-compressed and twanged setting. But, you know, I've done hyper-compressed stuff for so many years now. It's just the most intuitive thing for me. Like, I hear this sound and I want to copy it like, this. You know? Might be the exact opposite for someone else, right? Now, is there anything else happening in this one that could be interesting? We do have layering going on. I can talk a bit about the production. We have normal plugin usage, compression, EQ, a bit of reverb. There might be a bit of saturation on parts of the vocals. I don't think I actually use a de-esser in this one. In hypercompressed vocals, generally, I don't tend to use them as much, maybe because my articulation is a bit less crisp the way I do it. I think, you know, as in any music production, you just go for what sounds good, which is somewhat subjective. I think this sounds good, and, you know, there's nothing out of the ordinary going on. There's no auto-tune or Melodyne or any other kind of pitch correction in this one, because with dirty sounds like this, Melodyne doesn't recognize the pitch, at least not consistently throughout the whole verse. I don't know how Autotune would treat this because I've never used it before. Well, what else can I say? There's a couple of more brutal moments in terms of screaming later on. I have to do this for you, and the yell that you are inside. This is similar. And the yell that you are inside. Okay, notice how my sound color is determined also by my mouth opening, which means I'm not pronouncing the vowels as I would if I had spoken instead of sung or screamed this phrase. The only way out is tra. I just modified an oo towards an I. I would go as far as to say I substituted it for an a vowel. Okay? Yeah! Yeah! This is pretty close to atonal in the middle, but from the on and offsets, you can kind of hear which pitch range I'm in. And even if I didn't go for these pitched on and offsets, that range is ideal to have that kind of power in hypercompressed. If I did it a major third lower. Yeah! It's already not as extreme anymore. Yeah! As at that pitch, right? If I go even lower, yeah. Fifth lower, yeah! It starts to sound kind of weak. If I go an octave lower, yeah! It's not really usable in my opinion. Also, it's super quiet. Like, even if you like the sound in a live setting, that could get a bit problematic if you have the usual smaller stage with loud drums, loud amplifiers, blah blah blah. So while hypercompressed screaming and most things hypercompressed will not be as loud as non-compressed singing, screaming can potentially be, we need a certain minimal volume just for it to work in a live setting. In the studio, of course, you can do whatever you want, but I think even if I have a microphone and compression and all these things to make it louder, you can hear a difference in intensity, even if I normalize the volumes of yeah versus yeah. It's just not the same intensity, right? Now, next phrase is going to be interesting. We're up there, and then door. That's a lower range, but now I'm not as quiet as door I demonstrated before, because now on that specific syllable I am pushing a bit into it. So door. Can you hear how the volume doubles or even triples maybe? And it's not just that I'm, making something louder. That would defeat the purpose a bit. The texture changes. The overall spectrum changes a bit. I haven't actually analyzed this in Voce Vesta or anything, but I can hear that whoa does not have as much low end as whoa, the pushed version, right? Yes, there might also be a tiny bit more pitch in there. If I'm pushing it, there might be a bit of change in the high frequency range. But generally, the kind of bass oomph increases, at least to my perception. And even if we don't want a lot of bass in our vocal mix, I think it still makes a difference in the end product. Well, judge for yourself. This is how I did it. I think we can go on to the second upload, which is Nessun Dorma from Puccini's opera Turandot. And I've done this one already 2 years ago, but I've redone it. And if you're familiar with my first version, you can already tell by the first phrase that I'm going for a much darker sound. Is that because I decided to not make it too dark in 2023, and now I just prefer the darker one? No. I actually tried to go as dark as possible, even back then. It just wasn't possible. I tried to bring my larynx down as low as possible. I was aware of how you can find even more darkness if you compress the tongue, if you go for a more vertical or rounded mouth shape, high soft palate, all of these things. But still, I've just gotten better at darkening. Maybe it's even too dark this time. It's a matter of taste. In my opinion, you will find brighter versions and even darker versions. But a lot of the people that I like as Calaf, the guy who sings that aria, do sound something like that. This kind of sound color. Now, at that range, we are not compressing yet. Anything that goes higher than this kind of D, maybe E4 range, will be hypercompressed in all of this year's opera renditions that I uploaded. I've already talked about this in my blog post that I'll get to later in this stream, but it's already available on my website. It's my first blog post. It's almost more of an essay or a mixture of formats. I could call it an article. I could call it my personal vocal journey and other thoughts slash rants, whatever. Just see for yourself. I think you should read it. I think it's cool, especially if you have any ties with the opera world or are interested in classical singing, but not exclusively. So I think it could be very interesting also for people who have never had any encounters with classical teachers or who have never been to an opera before. I certainly did not have any classical lessons until age 21, something like this. I don't know off the top of my head. And I did not go to 25 operas a year until very recently, the last 3, maybe 4 years, right? I've become pretty obsessed with opera. And as you can tell from comparing my 2023 versus 2025 renditions of Nessun Dorma, I have improved my own singing relatively quickly, so I would say. Not more quickly than I've improved my rock or metal or jazz skills, but in classical in general, people would not expect you to sound as decent as that within 5 years of overall self-taught training. I have had lessons. I've had classical lessons, screaming lessons, overtone singing lessons. But all of these things I had after having experimented with these techniques by myself previously. The way I overtone sang, sang overtones, sounded like this before my first overtone singing lesson, right? Which doesn't mean I didn't improve it. Same with classical. Nobody taught me to sing the way I do in Nessun Dorma. We're gonna have a more detailed look at what exactly I'm doing and what I'm thinking about what I'm doing and what specifically I'm thinking in the moment where I'm doing it. But someone just asked me about 20 minutes ago, do you think this and that teacher can be good even if, this and that aspect of his teaching or his social media persona might be a bit problematic or ambivalent, to say the least. And, we can see that these great students have come out of apparently a fruitful teaching relationship, right? Isn't the proof that this or that teacher is good the obvious success of his students? And I would say the answer is no. I have been to over 30 teachers, not all of them for a long time, not all of them for the same topic, some of them very good, some of them not very good, most of them somewhere in the middle. Who of these 30 teachers is responsible for the way I sing now? All of them? Only the good ones? Only the ones where I spent a lot of time? Am I responsible too? Am I more responsible or less responsible than some of these teachers? The way I see myself as a pedagogue, that is a voice teacher, a vocal coach, in case you make any difference between those two descriptions. I've even led choirs before. I guess there's, multiple professions that kind of fall under the umbrella of voice teacher or vocal pedagogue. The way I see myself in that profession is that students who ideally already have a pretty specific goal, and if not, I can help them define it more thoroughly. Students come to me and they ask me to help them get to some point. It might not be the end goal, especially not, within one lesson or 5 lessons or even 1 year of lessons. But of course they want to get closer to that, and of course I want to help them as efficiently, as effectively, as quickly as possible. Sometimes the quickest way is not the most precise way. Sometimes the most precise way is much quicker in some people than in other people. Sometimes I fail to find the most precise way or the quickest way. But there's always some improvement. If there's no improvement over the course of 5 lessons, I tell people to find a better teacher. Let's say, thankfully, this hasn't happened before. But this has been my philosophy for all of the 6, almost 7 years now that I've been teaching. No matter whether I teach pop, rock, metal, or classical. And to get back to the original point, this seems to be kind of a radical, outlandish opinion in the context of classical and especially operatic vocal pedagogy. People don't expect teachers to be efficient, effective, quick. And they even get suspicious if you are one of these things or several of them. They're like, yeah, that worked pretty well, but it cannot be it. Why should it be so easy? How come I've wasted all of these years if it's that easy? It cannot be it. Otherwise, that would mean, that I've lost a lot of money and time and energy on people who are not good. That cannot be it.
Nessun Dorma.
I'm not satisfied with that. Vowel. Nessun Dorma. When I just sing it like this, I think it's more consistent. However, I'm not as loud right now as I was trying to be when recording this. Nessun Dorma. Maybe a bit closer. You can always make it louder. The question is, at which point do you start prioritizing volume over, well, I don't want to say beauty or chiaroscuro or any of these vague terms. Let's say consistency of sound color. I think I found an acceptable middle ground in that specific recording, but listening back to it right now, this recording is about half a year old. I think I can do better. Maybe I'll do another version of Nessun Dorma 2 years from now. I am satisfied with that phrase. So I have an U vowel, much darker than 2 years ago. And an I vowel. And they don't sound too different from each other. It's not a huge contrast between dark and bright. Or between too bright and too dark. Anything like that. They just seem pretty coherent to me. There's lots of different words for this, chiaroscuro being one of them. In German we have Vokalausgleich and Vokalangleich, and they totally do not mean the same thing at all. It's only only when I go lower, nella tua fretta sta, I lose a bit of depth in that specific recording. Maybe in the room, it wouldn't actually sound like this. There's also compression and a bit of EQ and reverb and all of these things on that recording. Less effects than on Doomsday, for obvious reasons. There's no layering here, you know. But it's always a bit tricky with classical singing. If you don't hear it in the room, and by the way, it really depends on the room and on where you sit in that room and how far exactly it is from the singer and where they are on stage, blah, blah, blah. But ignoring all of these aspects, it's usually easier to tell whether something works well in terms of how audible it is, how consistent it sounds, and so on, when you're in the same room with a singer, than when you hear especially classical singing on recording. And when I posted the social media stuff of this and other classical renditions on TikTok, I got a lot of comments from Italian opera fanatics, or maybe just normal Italians, I don't know. In Italian language, of course. So I had to use the TikTok translate function or my Google Lens translate function or DeepL. And I'm still not sure whether I got all of the meaning. But it's very funny that Italians will not only criticize my pronunciation of a foreign language while not even writing in English, but they will also have all sorts of feedback on my chiaroscuro and my scooping, all of these things that are essentially matters of taste. The only thing that's not really a matter of taste, in my opinion, when it comes to classical and especially operatic singing is it audible? Does it cut through? Does it balance well with the other stuff that's happening in the orchestra and maybe on stage with other singers or choir or whatever? Is it dependable, sustainable, all of these things, right? That's another thing that really annoys some classical singers and pedagogues. I have the same, let's say, ambitions is not the right word, the same ideas of what classical singing is supposed to be as I have about rock singing, screaming. I want them to not hurt and to work with the style. In this case, really only to be audible. But you could argue that if you do your scoops too slowly, if you darken the high range too much and brighten the low range too much, or the other way around, or whatever. If your vibrato is too fast, too slow, too big, too small, too irregular, or too regular, that does not do justice to the style. But at some point, it gets really subjective. You could do the same with jazz, So then that doesn't do that's it. Was that okay or was that not okay? Was it too dynamic, not dynamic enough? Was it too pitchy, not pitchy enough? I think that's subjective, matters of taste. This one's interesting. I really struggled with that one in 2023. So if I do it like this right now, it's too covered. If I do it like this, it's not necessarily too open, but definitely too bright, especially compared to the rest of the phrase. If I do it in hypercompression, which is what I did in this rendition, I can find a middle ground in terms of sound color and timbre, and I'm satisfied with that. It's much harder to have that sweet spot without any compression. And I will talk more about my operatic techniques 1 and 2 So my non-compressed versus hyper-compressed. Opera Edge, maybe I'll skip that discussion for now, but yes, I didn't do the hyper-compressed version in 2023, which is one of the reasons why it sounds much worse. One thing I noticed right now, and which is also an interesting aspect of doing the whole thing in hyper-compressed, so anything above E4 especially, is that my vibrato is not purely laryngeal, not purely a pitch oscillation, but also a volume oscillation with impulses from, in this case, my belly. Could be anywhere in the body. Could be, someone, bumping on my chest or whatever. In this case, I'm doing it very consciously with my belly at roughly 5 to 7 hertz. And if I don't use any hypercompression, I can rely more on the laryngeal wiggling, and have not so much volume oscillation. In CVT terms, they call it pulsations, right? In the low range here, it's mostly laryngeal again, because in that low range I'm not hypercompressing anymore. There's a smooth kind of, or a gradual at least, increase in compression through the passaggio, if you want to call it like that. And I do that in all of my classical attempts this year. I like my phrasing on this one. Ma mio mistero è chiuso in me. It's not 100% true to what's notated. It would sound more boring, arguably, if I sang it exactly like it's notated. I'm taking a bit of freedom in terms of tempo and, just note values. Like, if you compare them in Audacity, one will be almost twice as long than another one which is written the same length, I think it gets more dynamic, even though I'm not really changing my volume here. So this is pretty much the same sound color as I achieved in the 2023 version already. Well, right now, let's see. So that would be the non-compressed version. That's the compressed version. There's a bit of a difference, but they're both similarly dark, let's put it like this. Not exactly the same amount of ring, not exactly the same precise vowel color, but that was the one pitch and vowel in my first attempt at this aria where I was kind of satisfied with the sound color, and still am at least so satisfied with it that I'm not cringing when listening back. This is another interesting aspect about the vibrato. I'm not just hovering around the pitch, a bit above, a bit below, averaging on the pitch. No. I'm actually going sharp if you average it out. But it doesn't sound sharp. Well, maybe it does to you, but generally, even if you listen to Pavarotti doing this aria and classical singers in general, I was gonna say mostly tenors, but I think it's not a voice type or Fach thing. They will tend to be sharp rather than flat. If they're flat, they will get called pitchy. If they're a bit sharp, Not too sharp, but a tiny bit above the actual pitch. Compared to the orchestra and so on, people will say they have good pitch. In this case, I'm going below the pitch. You could call that an inverted vibrato. You could say that I'm a bit flat overall. Well, that would be going above, below. I don't care. It's not the most important pitch of the phrase. So on my first version of this, I would do this really, really big contrast between the loud beginning and the very quiet ending of that note, also called diminuendo or decrescendo. I didn't do as much of that here because I didn't want to let go completely of the compression. I can only reduce the volume so much without sounding pressed. That was already too far in my taste right now. I could, of course, have done something like Quando la luce so that specific syllable without any compression. But then the contrast in sound color is, well, it's not huge, but it's noticeable, especially if you focus on it, right? So I prioritized consistency in sound color over dynamics in this case. Vowel as previously with the Gargiliste. I did do a diminuendo here. Without any compression. Well, that's a lower pitch. Right? Now that's the choir part. Let's skip it. At that pitch, the volume oscillation is not that obvious, but then on the yell timbre, it's pretty obvious. You could criticize that. The alternative is to make the vibrato consciously smaller, and that would go against the expression of that particular phrase. Maybe it would sound better. Maybe nobody cares exactly about how I feel the expression in my head, if the sound result is better. But yeah, I want my singing to be fun. I'm not doing this, for money. I'm not an opera singer. These specific phrases, I must have sung 1,000 times. Not specifically for this recording. I mean, just like over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. The volume oscillation is heavy on these. It's an A vowel. It's not ch or ch or whatever. These all work. You'll hear many variations on this note. But going towards the A vowel, so opening more than it would be if you just pronounce it in speech, makes for the most powerful in my perception and in terms of what the decibel meter would measure. also cello, opening even a bit more at the very end. So it's almost too open, and it creates kind of a bit of a tension that we want to resolve into the harmonic resolution also. Just a couple of small details that I did think about. Number 3, the Emptiness Machine. Linkin Park. This time not Chester, but Emily. Oh, and of course,
Your blades are sharpened with precision.
your blades are sharpened with precision. The affectation is pretty heavy. Here I have quite intense distortion and saturation going on. All of the other effects that I talked about, even though I would say the reverb is very subtle here.
Flashing your favorite point of view.
It's kind of aggressive, even though it's not very loud. Flashing your favorite point of view. The articulation, both in terms of consonants, flash, and in terms of vowels, view, is a bit like this facial expression.
I know you're waiting in the distance.
I am showing my upper teeth a bit, even though this is a lip sync, right? All of my YouTube vocal covers are pre-recorded and then me, acting as if I was singing them in one take. Not necessarily because they are impossible to do in one take, but first off, I want them to sound as good as possible. I'm not doing this for money, I'm doing this for fun. So I'm doing it the way I like. And also, even if I manage to sing this song, which in this case it's not possible because there's going to be layering 2 different singers at the same time, even if I decided to do one take covers, they would not look as interesting. I would look very concentrated, boring, not very, let's say, expressive. Well, the expression is mostly something you're gonna hear in music, right? But a lot of the overall charisma, I guess is the word I'm looking for, that you have in a vocal performance comes from what it looks like what's the movement, what's the facial expression, and so on. I don't care about facial expression if it doesn't get me any closer to the desired sound. In some cases, it will get me closer to the desired sound. This depends a bit on style. It depends a bit on how hard the song is, and so on. This one's pretty tricky to sing, especially since it starts very low and then it goes extremely high, especially if you sing it in the original key, with more testosterone than the original singer.
Just like you are.
Just like you. That's just, little aggressive moments. Without them, just like you always do, just like you always do. It's the same volume, but not the same intensity, Let's go to the second verse.
Falling for the promise of.
That's the first chorus. Falling for the promise of, still not a lot.
It's been decided.
It's been decided how we lose. So this, I do have a bit of metal on these. In neutral, it would be too soft. But I do decrescendo, diminuendo, into neutral, so non-metallic sound for the all the non-CVT people, basically from a buzzier to a less buzzy or softer sound. Curving to neutral for the CVT people, if you want to know exactly what modes I'm thinking about. And of course, there's lots of effects here too. There's a delay timed specifically to the rhythm, and then sometimes you cut away parts that overlap, or there's a lot of work that goes into the production of this. I'm pretty sure there's at least twice the amount of work that went into the original production, and I just didn't hear all of the aspects. I only copied the ones that I heard, and I tried to be very precise. Like I didn't want to change up the speed of the delay or the length of the reverb or whatever, right? I wanted to be as close as possible, not in order to, completely imitate both. I do imitate, but, not to the point of an impression, I guess. But in order to just get as close as possible stylistically, I believe that if you are going for a different mix or a different melody or a different arrangement, those should be conscious decisions. And if they're not conscious, you really depend on luck. Usually it's not better than the original. And, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be better. It could be different and interesting in other ways. But, I'm not trying to make it different. I'm just doing a vocal cover here. Because there's a fire under the altar. If you do harmonies like this, your timing has to be very good. If your timing is not great, you can do a bit of time warp or quantization or whatever in post, but it's not gonna sound as good compared to da 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 da. Exact same timing, even of the scoops. The one I demonstrated right now was not precise enough because the da that was too slow. Da that was faster. It's such small nuances that make or break a convincing result. In this case, there's a double. I keep on lying. Maybe even a triple. I don't know. Maybe one in the middle, one on the left, one on the right. I think it's just two. That wasn't there before, at least in my version. A lot of work for essentially only one melody and a couple of background whispers that you end up hearing. This one's obvious. Already pulling me. It's the harmony. This vowel was pretty tricky. If you just say the words, already pulling me in, already under my skin. It sounds too close. It's not what she's doing. If you substitute it for an vowel, pulling me in, under my skin, it doesn't only make the lyrics a bit harder to understand. That would not be a big problem. We've heard worse in rock music. But pulling me in, it's not what I hear. It's not going to this shouty, football overdrive thing. Kind of in between of the I and the I. For me as a German, that's maybe a bit easier than for people who don't have that E phoneme in their language. Pulling me in! I'm kind of on the border between open and closed timbres. The vibrato with its pitch oscillations is kind of tapping in and out of each, right? I know exactly how this I have a bit of distortion there, and I achieved the distortion by twanging more, not by compressing more. So this is different now from the hypercompressed distortion in Doomsday. And you can hear the difference in sound color. Whoa! Whoa! Right? Not the same. And now we're in a super twanged medium fry scream. Whoa! Like that, right? If I had used compression or even a hypercompressed distortion previously, because I maybe prefer the darker, warmer color, the contrast between this range and this range would have been too big, right? I mean, I could have done but it's pretty effortful to stay up there and phrase the way Emily does for this whole song. Much less intuitive in this case compared to Doomsday, where I think it works best. I said that I hear this and I just want to do God, something like that. It's not the case here. I also already talked about how I have trouble making my medium fry much darker if I don't want to lose stability or noise, right? if you have a lot of fast syllables, it's not like double time rap here, but let you cut me open just to watch me bleed. That's more syllables than put me out of my fucking misery. And even on that one, last year, I went for hyper compression. A brighter hyper compression to imitate the color of my medium fry, but still, I just decided it's easiest if I sing with the sound color that I get in my medium fry. Of course, I did several takes, and then I chose the ones that I like best, and so on. But yeah, even in the parts before that, you have to be aware of what sound color the chorus, maybe the most important part of the song, will be, so that you can anticipate that and not work against that, and then, accidentally make up your own trap. This, even though it's not extremely belted, is thicker and possibly louder than this pitch. Counterintuitive, maybe. Not so much for me when I listen. I don't hear her bringing a ton of weight either. She will be a bit more chesty because it's easier. I can reach that note with more chest voice. For CVT people, metal. But yeah. The easiest way to provide that kind of phrasing and do justice to the overall style to me is to to have something that goes even higher without a ton of effort, so that we don't feel like we've reached the limit already. Let's jump.
Part of
I only want it. So this is 20 distortion with a tiny bit of push. If it was pure twanging distortion, maybe a bit too nasty. Maybe that would be a bit too dark. I think I'm somewhere in the middle, right? There will be another layer coming in a couple of seconds, but it will not be immediately obvious because I faded it in. That's what I hear from the original too. Not sure if that's what they did or if they just started on a later syllable or whatever. And that harmony smoothly goes into the main vocal. Into this one, right? Open just to watch me play. Anyway, not every syllable is distorted, let alone screamed, right? It's like, gave up who I am for who you wanted me to be. Only the important syllables have a bit of dirt on them, right? You will hear the same in the original, even if it's not the exact same choices and phrasing. But that's quite typical of, let's say, pop rock. I hope I don't offend any Linkin Park fans here, but like rock or even alternative metal or new metal, whatever you would call their music at different parts of the discography, it always has a pop or even mainstream ambition to it, right? And in that case, it's not that effective to let you cut me open, show how consistently you can distort every single syllable. It's much more effective to have a couple of chosen syllables and the rest of them being basically normal pop singing. This one's specifically distorted. Don't know why I'm open. So we have no completely clean part of this phrase here, but we have more or less distortion, more or less irregularity in the creaking and so on, right? We also have a layer of harmonies and a layer of doubles here. I forgot to mention. The emptiness for shade, the emptiness. I think this is the loudest note of the song. The Emptiness Machine! See, I need more power to get it on pitch, you know? The Emptiness Machine! That's the one I went for. Is there a less effortful way to do it? One that is on pitch without providing extra effort? Yes, of course. The Emptiness Machine! It smoothly goes up to the mix, but that's not the one I went for, because the really loud one, it's a fuller metallic overdrive with distortion. It's just the one that sounds 5% more intense on the recording. It's the last note of the song. Even if this was a one take, I would not tire myself out for a more important thing to come anymore, right? So, yeah. I believe the beginning and the ending is a tiny bit more important than what's in the middle. Even if maybe the chorus is the heart of the song, you know? Now, Di Quella Pira, second operatic. My first Verdi.
Di quella Pira.
And now, Di Quella Pira. It's not just Pira or Pira, but it's Pira. At least the way you hear it sung from many well-respected tenors. So I decided to go for the same whenever possible. Maybe it would be more bel canto, more clean to the original intent or whatever, if you would. Di quella Pira! Just like this, but nobody actually does that. Pira! Very counterintuitive in hypercompression, but yeah, I practiced. That low range is easier. Foco! Some people even do Marcia. I didn't do that. This one's the first exception. Por sangue vostro. I'm not gonna do vostro. Why? This one was pretty subtle. I think that would be a good compromise, I guess. It's neither na, just a trill, nor is it na, you know, this very clear aspirated goat bleating thing. Na, 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 na. I have to do it in the original key. Na, na. Yeah, something like this, right? This one's a more aggressive phrase, so you can hear more of the aspiration again. Matren felice! Right? And in some versions of this aria, we already have a high C here. But usually then, they only do half of the aria, only half of the length. I went for the 3.5 minute version. You know, it's not completely standardized the way you do it. There's a popularized version, and then, you know, some people only do half of it. Some people do the semitone lower because they don't want to do a super long C5 that might not be as secure or as convincing as the B natural, right? I went for the C5 and the long version, but, you know, this is a studio recording. I'm not singing this whole role on stage. Same with this part. I copied one specific version. I think it's Pavarotti, but even Pavarotti might have done more than one version over the course of his career. You will find other versions of that part too. It's quite interesting. The further back you go in music history, the less clearly defined the realization of the music will be. You could hear an interesting little flip from closed timbre to open timbre here without me doing anything there, other than my laryngeal wiggling for vibrato, which is a rare occasion in hypercompression. I talked about how I make for the volume and pitch oscillation mostly by giving impulses from my belly. Here would be a bit too aggressive. It would kind of defeat the purpose of drawing out that syllable very long. More! Also the vibrato would be too slow, right? So a bit of a bit of this, maybe mixed up with the belly, but to a different ratio, was the best attempt I could come up with here. The version I like best. That's not me. By the way, the links to all of the instrumentals, karaoke versions, or even original recordings that I've then made into an instrumental in some cases, are in the video descriptions of the respective videos. Now this and a couple of small nuances like Raja Filho. This time no aspiration at all. So that's the first time in this whole thing where I went for a more bel canto style trill. I made it especially soft, even softer than in the first half. Just for it not to get too boring. Same here. There's no aspiration in there, right? There's a bit of aspiration here because we're getting a bit louder and a bit wilder again. Right? We're really wild now. Back to old power. As I first see, hyper compressed, so operatic technique too. I wanted to talk about why I decided to do all of this year's covers with hypercompression. As I said, I've already explained this in the blog post, but while I can sing a high C in Technique 1, so the non-compressed operatic version, and I've been able to do that in 2023 already. I haven't been able to do it for a short time in 2024 because I focused so much on the hypercompressed version that my muscle memory got confused. But while generally I've been able to hit that note and higher notes, even sometimes even up to E flat 5 in a somewhat operatic non-hypercompressed approach for more than 2 years now, it does not sound nearly as good. It does not connect to my approach in the lower range nearly as well. Ironically, because for hypercompression, I'm not compressed here. I'm kind of gradually increasing compression as I go upright. And then at some point I'm hypercompressed and it's a somewhat consistent color, which I achieved by doing more, changing more parameters. Whereas in the non-hypercompressed approach, it already starts to sound less consistent in the middle range here, even though I did not change as much. Of course, my mouth shape changes a bit. Of course, the internal shape is not exactly the same. But in terms of effort, in terms of what I need to think, am I going this road or that road? I'm not actually changing that much, but as is clearly audible, even if I have a C there, I just lose a lot of power. I can do a louder version, but then I cannot sustain it as long as C. You know, not the right technique for this aria at this point in my vocal journey, right? Even if, you know, even that short C, I'd much rather doing hypercompression all day long than even 3 seconds in non-hypercompressed. We're gonna get another C, which is gonna be ridiculously long. On this note, we do have a bit more of that volume oscillation. It's almost the action of on, off, on, off, on, off. Up there, it doesn't actually lead to pauses in between of the peaks of the vibrato, but I'm not thinking about a sound result like this. I'm really thinking and it leads to that result. So that's more wild, less legato compared to the first one. Oh, Ramo! And even the overall phrasing, like the timing of the syllables and the articulation and all that, are, you know, just more unhinged. Less hinged. And in this case, I'm already opening up the timbre into the shouty football thing on pitch. So it's not oh as I've described before, but oh, simple but effective. Have you listened to the close timbre E vowel? It comes a second time. That time I'm going to open it. That would be too open if you do that in recital or in front of a classical jury who's gonna give you feedback on how bel canto your approach was, but it's the cooler version. We had an A vowel and an E vowel. In reality, they sounded the same. It's not a difference in vowel. You could make that difference. Alarme, not especially the E, very close to speech pronunciation. But you could go for a slightly different timbre tuning on both. Something like this. But why? Who cares about, you know, pure vowels or diction? I hate these words. Who cares about that when you can have power? Right? And it's a bit over to the top, especially with how long I'm drawing this. Probably not the way I would do it live. But by the way, if you're asking yourself, is that cheated? You know, because it's a studio recording, obviously, and I'm talking about how I wouldn't do it live. Well, the alar, first half of it, is not the same take as the mi, second half of it. Not because I couldn't do it as long. Actually, I've done more than 20 takes of this whole C, and I've sung the C every time. I can do it now for you. It's a lot of work. I'm not gonna tire myself out, but I've shared this in an Instagram story. You can see the list of like colorful Pro Tools takes, and I skipped through all of them, and they are all that. But you know, I'm a bit perfectionist about this. While I could do something like this. Yeah, I didn't like that the vibrato was so slow. I didn't like the little scoop on the me. I wanted it to stay exactly there, but it would cost me even more energy to stay up there because of the consonant and all that. You know, it's these small nuances that are just so much easier to cope with if you do more than one take. And so even though what you hear is not sung live in one single take, you know, doing it for 20 times proves that it's, you know, not so much a matter of is it possible to sustain it that long? I could probably sustain it 10 seconds longer if I didn't have anything else to do that day. It's just a matter of what's the most efficient process of recording something like this. And remember, this is studio recording I'm doing for fun, not for money. Even if I did it for money, it would not be enough money to do one take with the same over-the-top decision at the end. Why am I doing an over-the-top decision? Well, because it's fun, but also because it does not actually go so much against the intention of this aria. This aria is pretty wild. You know, the guy has red glasses on. Well, I have red glasses on in this video, mostly because I'm trying to present my sunglasses collection. But, you know, it's not random which glasses I pick. I pick these angry, fiery, seeing red glasses. And by the way, there's also a black version of those same shaped glasses coming up later in Esultate, also by Verdi. But first, Rainbow High, another totally over-the-top performance from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Evita. I love this instrumental, well, karaoke version. There's vocals in it. Even though I would have loved to do the backings myself, but this was the best.
I came from the people, they need to adore me. So Christian Dior me, from my head to my toes. I need to.
I'm putting in a lot of effort to make this phrase as expressive as possible. I'm pushing on some of these syllables. I came from the, you know, something that I wouldn't do with every single syllable of every single song of, you know, a 7 days a week show. 8 shows a week show, I should say. Because, you know, you have to be ready to do the same exact stuff, ideally at least. Not only every night, but sometimes multiple times a day if you are in a musical. Well, I'm not ever gonna sing Evita because Evita is a female role. And even if we start getting experimentative with this, as has happened before with, I think, Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, another Webber musical theater play. You know, you don't just become a musical theater actor, especially not at a high level. It might be even harder to set foot in that industry than to become a classical performer or an opera singer. I've been asked, when are you gonna go and sing opera on stage? When are you gonna, you know, make your Opera Leipzig debut. No, I'm not going to do that for various reasons. I've talked about it before in last year's live stream. But even if I wanted, that would probably be more realistic than becoming a musical theater performer. I'm doing this for fun. What I wanted to say originally is I'm starting with a lot of energy, sometimes losing a bit of air on consonants, where in a more efficient version I would try to not lose it. Interestingly, here at the end of the phrase you can hear that I've lost some air. Let's hear it again.
From my head to my toes.
From my head to my toes. Ugh, and the air is gone. Well, that's cool, right? It would be a bit boring if I started, I came from the people, they need to adore me, and I ended from my head to my toes. Nothing has happened.
I need to be dazzled.
And then, after a very audible gasp, the same thing again. So we always have a big refill and then a lot of waste. That's cool.
I want to be rainbow high.
A tiny bit of Kermit voice, rainbow high. Without the Kermit voice, rainbow high. Sounds a bit boring. This is just my taste, but especially on musical theater, but all theatrical staged singing, I tend to prefer more rather than less.
They must have excitement.
It's almost a distortion, not quite, but I'm going for it, and you can even hear the intention there, right? I'm not trying to. I must have it stay clean or control my distortion very much. Like I switch it on by doing swang or compression, whatever. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just expressing,
And so must I.
Now we're gonna jump up the octave. Originally.
I'm the product. Yes, man. I'm the product.
So much over the top, but I love it. And if you listen to and watch Patti LuPone's cocaine-fueled TV performance of that song, Rainbow High, I'm not very far off.
You sell me so Machiavelli, making Argentine rose.
The distortion is mainly twanged, but there is a bit of push to it. Pure twang distortion, would be that. Is closer to what I'm doing. So there's the twang, and then the push aspect to it. Not the most efficient, but at least more expressive, more demanding attention, if you will, than if I very obviously do something that does not take a lot of effort. It would be much easier to sing the song na 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 na, with a super controlled mix and just the most sustainable distortion strategies and
I need to be thrilling.
Even that. I'm not even sure whether that's a distortion or rattle, like whether false folds or writ noise are responsible for the dirt and the sound. I'm just pushing for a bit of grit.
And now shall be rainbow.
That was probably the most controlled note so far. Rainbow! Because I'm trying for it to be very much on pitch. For the scoop to be a very specific timing. Because later on the song, when this phrase repeats, I'm gonna go for the exact opposite. Okay, so that's one moment where I did prioritize a very specific outcome over just flow of emotional expression. Okay.
They need their escape.
They need their escape. Tiny bit of air splitting here. Okay.
So do I.
So, and a tiny bit of Kermit 2, which we did not have in the high range, but we're getting closer again to the na range of the first verse, and I don't want it to seem like it's two completely separate characters. The contrast is great, and it's inevitable, even if I try to tone it down. But later on in the song, I'm gonna use these little moments where it goes to the lower range to to show that these are, in fact, the same voice, just different variations of it, right?
Figure, dress, voice, style, movement, and magic ring, glamour, big time excitement.
Oh, the death coming stars expect me to outshine the enemy, the aristocracy. I won't disappoint them.
This one was pretty tricky because of the lots of consonants, the fast syllables. Oh, my death coming! You know, if I tried right now, you can hear the crack. That wasn't even planned, right? Oh, my death coming stars expect me to outshine the enemy. But if you focus too much on the articulation or on not cracking, then you lose the flow of it. So that's pretty tricky.
I'm the savior.
That's much easier.
I'm the...
Even the vibrato, I'm combining a pretty heavy laryngeal wiggling with a bit of that belly impulse that I talked about before. It's actually not that tricky to synchronize the two to the same timing. If, and this is one of the contexts where this applies again, you are going for the right emotional expression. You might watch my analysis of my operatic stuff and then compare it to my analysis of this one and other pieces and say, well, isn't he contradicting himself? You know, for one of these he says, don't let your emotions lead you too much. For the other one he says, fuck technique, just go where the moment leads you. In one context, he will value subtlety, and in another aspect, he will be pretty much in the face, you know. Different music requires different solutions, and, you know, this is pretty much subjective, you know.
That's what they call me, so Lauren back call me, anything goes.
I like this one. So Lauren back call me, anything go. It's not just a gradual opening from E to A, instead of me, a very sudden opening, or a less obvious contrast, like me, anything go, like that. It's also a gradual increase in intensity and volume, crescendo you could say, but you know, I get a bit of extra distortion, I get tiny variations in pitch that I'm not actually going for, because I kind of put them all under the umbrella of intensity. Anything goes. You know, you could analyze a lot of separate or seemingly separate aspects of what happened there. What I'm thinking is just more. Okay? So there's specific parts where this kind of phrasing makes a lot of sense, and then others where it doesn't.
To make me fantastic, I have to be rainbow.
Remember, first one was rainbow, very controlled. On this one, of course, I'm going for a bit of vibrato. I'm going for sharp rather than flat here, but the exact level of sharpness, the exact number of vibrato impulses and so on, I'm not planning those. Rainbow high. It's just well, this one was obviously flat, so that wouldn't have been the take I was going for, but the intention of the take that you hear was the same. Let me try once again. Rainbow high. This was totally over the top, obviously, but now I was a whole semitone sharp, and more than a semitone sharp on the next syllable, just, you know, so you get the point. My approach here is to just spit it out. Again, if I was to sing this regularly, or if I had only one take instead of, you know, 5 takes, and then I pick the one that I like the most, which is most on pitch, rainbow, I would probably do something like this, where I imitate what it sounds like if you don't think, but I actually do think. The no makeup look, you know? But no, I didn't do that during the recording, to be honest. I just sang.
Magical colors, you're not decorating a...
Yeah! So that's definitely a rattle here. My approach is not that different from a push distortion, though. Yeah! That would be push distortion. Yeah! That would be a rattle. I think I'm just pushing even more.
For a night on the town.
But the push is gone as soon as the distortion's not required anymore. And pretty twangy, actually. Town! And there might be a bit of twang distortion creeping in on some of the hills of the vibrato. Or some of the on and offsets, you know, some of the syllables with more closed vowels, blah, blah, blah. I'm not controlling any of that either. But the point is that when I want a dirty sound, some kind of grit, whether it's distortion or rattle or whatever, I am getting it in this one by pushing. Not what I teach my students. Totally what you can afford to do in a recording of an over-the-top musical theater song in your studio, if you do it for fun and not for money and not 8 shows a week.
And now let a second-rate queen get a kicks with a crowd.
Here, did I opt for a very specific pitch? Kicks? No. Kicks! I just went for this syllable special. It needs some kick.
Next time!
More control again. Next time! Okay. I don't want this one to be too pitchy. Especially the speed and size of the vibrato. Yeah! That is very much controlled. I could do it slower. Yeah! I could do it maybe even a bit faster. Let's see. Yeah! It's harder to sustain it very long because there's a lot of tension in the body that I could maybe get rid of. But yeah, the speed that I went for is very much planned. The size, I could make it smaller. Yeah! I could make it bigger. Yeah! I could probably even make it less regular or more regular. You know, my point is I'm constantly going back and forth between I'm planning exactly how this is going to come out, or at least, let's say, with an 85% accuracy. And, I don't know how this is going to sound. I'm just going for something, and it's going to be good because it's going to be connected to this exact expression, right?
Stop!
Rattle, and this time more twangy, less push.
Somewhere to go, we'll put on a show!
We'll put on a show! That wasn't completely planned, right? I'm not going for some kind of phrasing. Not in a moment where we have this sudden tempo change and, you know, within the last 20 seconds of the song, suddenly a new idea. That's too important to just go by emotion, you know?
Like a
Here's the vibrato again.
because you wanna know what you're gonna get in me.
I cannot do fast syllables like this if I'm being led only by emotion.
What you gonna get in me? Just
Yeah, it's just, even if I don't focus enough on the pitch and only on the articulation, the pitch doesn't come out right. So yeah, it's just constant push and pull, you know?
Just a little touch of Argentina's brand of star quality.
Very bright to very dark, and then back to bright. Argentina's brand of star quality. Something like this, right? Over the top maybe, but yeah. I'm not gonna do a boring version of Rainbow High. Quella mi creda. Another Puccini. Not the last one. So this one starts in low range. Quella. And the highest note is going to be, spoiler, B flat 4. Not as high as the Verdi or Nessun Dorma. But we want it to feel like an absolute climax. Because it is, right? Especially when it comes the second time. You know, we want it to feel already like it's the absolute maximum the first time, and then we want to top it even more. So, in order to achieve that, we don't want to make the beginning too intense, but also it's a low note and we need to be heard, so it has to be somewhat intense to be loud enough, right? So this is pretty tricky about this one, in my opinion. Is that the right pitch?
libero e lontano.
Even here, we could be too loud already for the high note to have all of this comparative power. That would be too much. But we could also be too quiet.
Libero e lontano.
It's too furtive, right? So, a lot of forward and backward influencing, like multi-directional domino effects from a musical standpoint that, of course, then translate to a technical realization. Okay? So all of these are close timbre. I could also do no, but I didn't do that. No! I went to the covered version because the high note is also going to be covered. And if I make the middle range bigger than necessary, then the high range, which in this case is only going to be a B flat, is high enough, but well, a whole tone lower than a C, minor third lower than a C sharp, you know? We just want to be aware of how they all relate to each other. By the way, I'm going not for a lot of dynamics per se, like you could do something like that. I'm not doing that. I'm going for very straightforward, but not because I don't care. I just told you how much thought I put into the specific volumes and phrasings, blah, blah, blah. But because I believe it's more effective that way. There's a tiny bit of emotional expression here. A bit of that delay. A bit of that wavering. It's not even a vibrato. It's more like an accent with vibrato, right? And even here, when we're getting very, very close to the first climax, it is already written in the music. I don't need to to increase it by doing stuff like this, right? It's all written already, right? And if I'm not being dynamic enough, maybe the orchestra is increasing the dynamics. Comes the high note. Okay. I'm doing a bit of a dynamics thing here, not by thinking quiet and loud or by doing more or less per se, but by going for a covered version of a vowel and then an open version of another vowel on the same pitch. It would be more obvious if it was the same vowel and do different variations of that one. But no, it's erio. And I could do erio. Both of them open. I could do erio. Both of them closed. I could do what I've done here. Erio. Close to open, which is quieter to louder, just because of the timbre switch, right? I could do a more extreme version of the same thing. Erio. So modifying the vowels even more towards E versus A, a bigger phonetic distance, right? Or a more subtle version. Erio! That's almost not, close to open. Certainly not really quieter to louder. I went with the one I demonstrated, and that you can hear for very specific reasons. That was open timbre. Remember how I talked about how I'm not gonna make the middle range too open in order to take away from the high note? Well, now we're in the second half of that aria. The open timbre, the more shouty football stadium kind of thing, will be less stable maybe than the close timbre version. But if it works, let me try again. I think it will have the bigger impact, and if you can follow up with an even more intense B flat than you've done in the first half, that's not going to be a problem. On the contrary, it's going to be even better than if you didn't do it. Let's see if, and if so, how I achieve an even more intense second climax. We do have, again, covering at notes that don't necessarily have to be closed in timbre. So, going back, going down, in terms of dynamics, before it then explodes again. Also already written in the music. Tanto bene, tanto bene. There's repetition there. And now we have an A-vowel. So we're bringing one syllable up. That's even more intense, in my opinion, than Edio, or Edio. That kind of repetition that we have before. And we've already kind of played the repetition card this time with the tanto tanto. You know, it's like, you could say maybe I'm overinterpreting what's happening here. Maybe they just didn't have any more words, so they were like, okay, let's repeat it. I don't think that's what happened, and even if that was what happened, it works out very well, and without actually doing much more in terms of power on this second B flat, it seems bigger. And yes, I'm also sustaining it a bit longer, and I'm doing the other trick that I already talked about in my analysis of Nessun Dorma, where I open the timbre on the way downward, right? That makes it even more intense, because like, on the last split second of the sustained note, we have another crescendo, right? And then again, giving up a bit of control on the ba to gain intensity. You could sing it very bel canto. That's a bit boring, right? I have one small criticism to myself. Mio solo fio. These last syllables, they're at a slower tempo, makes them bigger, right? The consistent realization of what the music calls for, especially when I'm listening back to it right now, would be to become louder, not quieter at the end. What I did was Fior, something like this, to end it on a softer, more introverted kind of expression. Doesn't make sense. Why? Fior. Maybe open up the vowel, maybe get a bit sharp, maybe increase the speed of the vibrato a bit. Well, maybe I can do another version of this one next time. Maybe I can do a technique 1, so a non-compressed version of it at some point. I definitely tried that. I think I even recorded some takes, but then decided to do this second technique I can try right now. Probably will not sound nearly as good, and you'll know why I didn't go for that one. Bella mia vita, mio solo fior. Something like that. That worked, but maybe it lacks a bit of ring compared to this one, right? Now, we are at pretty much half of today's stream, so I'm gonna spend some time in the chat now. My voice is a bit low and only coming from one of the channels. Yes, that's because this is a mono mic, but we do have a general improvement in sound quality compared to last time, because last time I didn't get this mic to work. The sound came from my webcam mic. So I'm gonna get even better next time, I promise. Rohan asks, how do you know that you're satisfied with a particular take? If you have the original artist take in your head, how do you know you've cracked it in your voice or even surpassed it? Well, it's not so much about cracking or even surpassing the original. It's more about, when I listen back to mine, do I like it? Sometimes I don't like as much as the original, but I like it. Sometimes I like it more than the original. Sometimes I like both to the same extent, even though they're not exactly the same. Sometimes they are pretty much exactly the same, you know, when I'm trying to get exactly the same sound color. I did that a lot with my early screaming idols, Jens Kidman of Meshuggah and you know, other people, where I tried to emulate exactly what they did. Not so much what I'm doing anymore at this point. I just trust my ears, you know. I'm a musician. I like good music. It's subjective, but it's even more clear to me if I let that subjectivity take over. Do you suspect Mario del Monaco used hypercompression? No. But I do get closer to his sound color and intensity if I use my Technique 2, the hypercompressed approach, at the moment. I just gave a little demo of how my Technique 1 non-compressed approach sounds like on B flat. I gave some like more mixed C5 or even higher demonstrations of my non-compressed approach earlier and even right now, just so you can compare back to back. Yeah, it's a bit trickier for me in Technique 1 for reasons that I've explained in greater detail in my blog post. Gigi Bond says, why grandpa voice? It hinders the rise in pitch. It doesn't. I can go much higher than I have to for classical tenor singing. It's just a bit harder compared to some other approach, but interestingly, not harder to me personally with my personal vocal journey and so on compared to Technique 1. Like, it's much harder for me to bring that high without raising larynx. I can, of course, do that, but that's not classical anymore, right? I know that grandpa voice might be considered uncontrolled contraction. You probably mean constriction in a complete vocal technique. Well, they might consider it support locking or a hidden incorrect support, I think is the wording that I have in the app. It depends a bit on the particular CBT coach. Whenever I demonstrate that sound successfully to CBT teachers, they're like, yeah, that's nice, that's edge mode or whatever mode they hear in a specific demo. And when I tell them what I do, when I instruct people to do it like this, when I have them feel my belly, which is much harder, much more stiffened in hypercompression compared to non-compressed singing, they will suddenly not like it anymore. And then we have a bit of that cognitive dissonance. We don't like the way the sound is done, but we like the sound, and there's no problems about it. do we adjust our dogma, or do we adjust whether we like the sound or not? Or do we both do we let both of these perspectives just hover somewhere in our brain without necessarily having to resolve them right away? Ambiguity tolerance. Was that hammer vibrato and hypercompression? No, not hammer vibrato. Hammer vibrato would be ha 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 e this, or without aspiration e something like that. You can hear hammer vibrato in Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. Even flow, thoughts arise like butterflies, something like that. Or Michael Stipe of REM. Everybody hurts sometimes. Pretty subtle in these cases. For more extreme cases, you'd have to listen to, I think it's Buffy St. Mary, but maybe I'm getting the name wrong. Her cover of Yesterday a child came out to wonder. Something like this. What's the name of the song? The Circle Game. Originally by Joni Mitchell, I believe. And Joni Mitchell does not use hammer vibrato, so you can compare back to back. People will often say that Edith Piaf, non, rien, rien, is a perfect example for hammer vibrato. However, personally, I'm pretty sure I don't hear hammer vibrato, at least not pure hammer vibrato. I think I actually hear a fast pitch vibrato. So laryngeal wiggling as demonstrated before. No, rien, rien. Something like this. Maybe a combo. And in my Di Quella, Pira, which I suspect this question is about, Pira, well, if it was faster and if it had the musical intention of a hammer vibrato, you could call it that. I would say I'm just saying pi-hi-hi-hi-ra. I would not call it a vibrato, especially since the vibrato afterwards, ra, is mostly laryngeal, and then on the high pitches, getting a bit of that pulsation or intensity vibrato belly impulse thing. Do I offer a scream course? I don't offer any online courses per se. I do offer private lessons, either in real life or online via Zoom. I offer workshops, some of them online. You will find all of my 2026 workshops on my website on New Year. I don't do, pre-recorded courses that you then have to buy and hope that you get something out of that. I have uploaded tutorials, but they're for free and they have no guarantee that they'll actually work for you because they don't give you real-time individual feedback. That's the big downside of that kind of content. Max de Santana asks, how would you explain from the smallest and basic mechanism to the complete opera build? So how do we build an operatic sound from scratch? Well, it depends what scratch is for that particular person, right? We can, for the sake of simplicity, start with just sound color, given that the particular person already knows how to close their vocal folds, maybe even to produce higher volumes, like in yelling, without tiring themselves out. If these basics aren't there yet, we have to practice them first, and it won't sound very operatic. It will just sound like healthy speaking and yelling. But if you talk like this, 1, 2, 3, let's assume this is an efficient way of talking, minus maybe my weird jaw movements during sibilance. We'll have to darken the sound color first before we can add a lot of ring. I know some people will go the opposite way. They will add a lot of ring, or you could say this is brightness. I prefer to say clarity if I'm going for another word than ring. Italians will say squillo. People will call it singer's formant cluster. And then after you have that, try to darken. I believe this is for most people, especially if they don't have any classical experience before that, counterintuitive. More counterintuitive even than darkening first and then finding a ring in that. So I would go for a darker sound color by lowering the larynx, raising the soft palate generally, even though that's not a must in my opinion. Going for more vertical or even rounded mouth shapes rather than spread. You will always see variation. Even in the larynx position, it will not always be low or equally low, consistently low throughout, But generally, let's say, these three main aspects, low larynx, high soft palate, more vertical than horizontal mouth shape, are kind of the home base. Then you have the tongue. The tongue can do a lot of different things. You will see low tongues in some classical singers. Generally, those will not tend to be the most ringy ones, even though you will find exceptions, and then you can kind of go into detail about what vowel is that. Is it an A vowel, where the tongue will generally be lower, and do we have a lot of twang, and how high is the larynx specifically in that case, or what the embouchure and so on. But generally, if you keep everything else the same, a lower tongue will not result in the most ringy sound. You will see higher tongues, and generally also get a bit of ring out of that. Of course, if you only have a high tongue but no other kind of strategy for ring, which we're going to get into in a minute, that's still possibly not going to be enough for some stuff. But generally, yes, within the constraints of low larynx, high soft palate, vertical mouth shape, you could have a lower or higher tongue. Height of the tongue is not the only dimension that we can vary. We can vary the front to back dimension, and we can do that specifically with different parts of the tongue. We could have a retracted tongue as a whole. That starts sounding more dark. We could have only the tip of the tongue retracted. Then it sounds a bit like the Jarl. Jonas Kaufmann does that on certain vowels. Right? We could have a fronted tip of the tongue, but a retracted back. We could have even the Kermit voice, even though that will not have a low larynx anymore. Some people do sing like that. I don't really consider it a typical operatic technique, but I guess yeah, it could work. Probably not the loudest or the most efficient way to do that. Generally, what I wanted to say about the tongue is there's way more than one option, but the one I'm going for, especially if I'm going for these spinto to dramatic sounds, is the compressed tongue, where the back of the tongue and the front of the tongue meet each other very close to the palate. So it's neither a retracted tongue nor a fronted tongue. It's just a tongue that kind of folds together like a fist. Okay, that's the compressed tongue. And then sometimes what my tip of the tongue tends to do is to curl back like that. That's my personal habit. It's not really so important for the sound. Now that is the darkness. My demos already had a bit of ring. So how do I get the ring? Well, I get the ring from narrowing my epilarynx, so the space above my vocal folds. In hypercompression, so technique 2 specifically, there will also be a lot of false fold constriction. So even before the whole tube narrows, already the false vocal folds or ventricular folds will almost close. Not completely, otherwise we'd have a bit of distortion, right? Which we don't want most of the time in opera. What exactly the tongue does has an influence on how strong the ring will be. I touched on that before. However, this kind of varies from pitch to vowel to volume even. Like resonance is a more complicated thing than I can touch on within a couple of minutes here. Generally, when I do something like that, just observe where's my larynx, what's my mouth shape. Maybe you can see either the important parts of my tongue or my soft palate. Usually you only see the front of the tongue, which is not always the most important part. But just observing people will give you a lot of info. And even if the posture is the only thing you can see from very far or from the angle of the video, whatever, that could also give you info. In hypercompression, I tend to have a more extended neck. Not as much compared to like hypercompressed distortion, where I really look up. I don't tend to do that as much in hypercompressed opera, but compared to the non-hypercompressed approach, you can see a bit of a difference there, right? You could focus on other parts of the body, like do I have a more extended chest or a more extended back? Is there a general forward lean or backward lean? All of these things. But to just answer the question very simply, too long didn't listen. Dark sound color by mainly low larynx, high soft palate, vertical mouth shape. And ring by constriction in the right places. And then you sing with that, and in order to make it stylistically adequate, you go for very certain vowel variations and a very certain speed and type of vibrato and blah 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 blah. It's not gonna happen in one day, but it might happen within 5 years, which is faster than a lot of opera people think that learning how to sing opera is possible. Okay, let's continue. Radiohead, Nude. I've seen Radiohead live this year. Now I can die happily. I have not recorded the backing vocals. This is just the original instrumental. Someone has commented on my shit. I've done it later on in the song. It's just so much work. I'm not getting paid for this. Now, let's jump to the moment where I actually start singing. Don't get any. Some in falsetto and then a light chest voice. In CVT terms, it's falsetto neutral versus fuller density neutral. Fuller density doesn't mean it has to be very loud. In fact, I'm very quiet. But it means that I'm not restrained. I'm not actively tilting my thyroid cartilage forward in order to stretch my vocal folds, right? I can show you what it sounds like if I start in that kind of tilt position, even from the start. Don't get any. It sounds a bit more whiny, and vibrato is more likely to happen. No, I'm trying to be really plain, really simple, just quiet, you know? Don't get any. I even get a bit of that creaky onset or offset, just transition between those pitches and registers. Not because I'm trying to do it any like that. Oh baby, That's not what I'm doing here. This is indie rock. It's very emotion driven again, right? But more subtle emotions this time compared to Rainbow High, for example, right? Let's continue. We have a tiny bit of creaking here. I'm not sure if I can recreate this right now. Yes, there it was, right? Ideas. Small nuances that I liked during the recording. They were not controlled. Right now I tried to control it and I kind of succeeded, but maybe the expression wasn't as convincing right now, right? I hate the word authenticity. Like I had many words, some of which you already heard today. Diction, if you remember. There's basically a bad, there's a bad A word, a bad B word, a bad C word, a bad D word. the bad M word. Actually, there's many bad M words, like mixed voice is one of them. Manipulate, as in you're manipulating your sound, that's not your true voice, is another word I hate even more than mixed voice. There's also a bad N word, which is let me think about it. I was gonna make a joke, but cannot come up with a punchline. Nasality, nasal resonance. Nasal resonance is gonna be my most hated N word in the context of singing. Very stable even throughout the pretty slow and somewhat irregular laryngeal pitch vibrato. By the way, this is pretty close to how Tom York does his vibrato. I'm not trying to copy his overall sound too much. It does sound similar because it's a quiet falsetto. You know, a quiet falsetto always sounds like quiet falsetto. But his approach to vibrato, I really tried to copy in this case. Alright, so an aspect of my singing is conscious, intentional, and maybe practice, if you will. And other aspects are just what the moment offers. You pay yourself wide and fill up with noise. I'm so quiet that the pitch vibrato results in on and off phonation, right? It's almost like hammer vibrato, ha 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 ha, but I'm not doing hammer vibrato. It's it's just the phonation threshold pressure. It's not necessarily high as in the delayed onsets that I talked about earlier in the Doomsday cover. It's just I'm so quiet, and I'm going for a sound that would usually be louder than the volume I am at right now. So that results in these random ins and outs of phonation. But there'll be something missing. Something. Now we're in chest voice. Where previously on this pitch we'd been falsetto. Okay, so we have these subtle variations in dynamics. Chest voice. Now that you feel, but I keep now that you feel this range consistently in falsetto here. You don't. That's probably the softest that my chest voice can be. Well, you don't. At some point it's not gonna phonate. But yes, I'm trying to have the intensity of the falsetto and the chest voice be really similar, but I'm still going for chest voice for some subtle variations in timbre. Now that you feel it, you don't. That would be falsetto. You don't. That would be chest voice. I prefer the chest voice. You gotta interesting. That was kind of the opposite of a delayed onset. That was kind of a premature offset. Rails. Where for the last half of a second, no vibration is happening. But I'm not ready for the consonant to actually end the syllable yet, right? These are just little things that make something very expressive, and you can make them intentionally, like when I demonstrated it right now. I'm pretty sure that when I recorded it, it was not intentional. It was just the moment. Now it gets interesting. So don't get any. that volume modification and more twang in my falsetto without going extra loud, which would be totally unacceptable here. That was a conscious decision. I remember that. I wanted my falsetto to be stronger, but I didn't want it to go more chesty or mixed voice or da. That's not it yet, right? It would be too simple. Da. We want to stay in falsetto, but try to break out, and it might even sound a bit nasty in isolation. Da. Why? If you can have a more beautiful falsetto like da. No. We want it to almost break, but not quite. Oops! Now we found our way out of falsetto, and it's very obviously chest voice. It's not even big. It sounds like this. It's big ideas. Again, a bit of the subtle creaking, and the overall phrasing and all these things haven't changed too much. But now something has happened. If you've fallen asleep because you don't like Radiohead so far, you will wake up again, even though I'm not screaming, even though I'm not singing at volume 10 out of 10. Big ideas, they're not gonna happen. Back to falsetto, gonna happen. I could have done a crescendo like this. I haven't, because it would be not very tasteful, but I'm just saying you can play with dynamics on the axis of register the same way you can do it on the axis of sound color or vowel, speed of vibrato, all these things that I've mentioned before, right? Creaking was not planned, and so was my demonstration right now, where it didn't get any creaking. It's just like, you'll go to hell for you. The overall phrasing, the overall direction is very much planned, but the exact outcome is not, because I could not have that sense of direction if I focused on every single syllable. And on hell, I want a bit of creaking in the middle. This one was planned right now. I can switch it on and off at will. That's not the thing. But I have to be smart and tasteful enough, at least subjectively, in my opinion, as someone who listens to radio a lot and likes this kind of music, blah, 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 to know when to give up control and to not suffocate the music in overly ambitious usage of conscious effects. We're getting really loud here. Let's say volume 7 out of 10. Pretty much a tripling of the original volume, if not even more. It's not operatic yet, but for this song, it's almost too much. Why? Because we're going, again, to a climactic situation here. But the climactic situation is kind of not so satisfactory if we are too loud right before that, and if the high note is not as strong as it could be, and if the band stops playing, which is what happens here. What's that, right? It's not really climax, but everything before that tells us it's gonna be, right? It's so close to falsetto. I even think that in the original, he's just doing a more connected falsetto. I like the chest voice version, but even though it's in chest voice, it's somehow not the full thing. In order to be climactic after a volume like this, dirty man is there, I would have to open up the vowel or add a bit of distortion or whatever. But that would not be Radiohead, right? So it's like multi-directional domino effects. Now we're back to falsetto. So here's the part that some people wished for. You can just take this and then splice it in the beginning if you preferred. Maybe the very ending could be interesting. This is very quiet. Almost not phonating, right? And now we have this kind of line cliche. While the bass is doing doom 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 bom bom. And I'm doing it on an aval. Anyway, this is a pretty effective way if you're doing soft stuff and you don't want to increase dynamics by increasing volume. Just change the vowel. You know, if it's not a specific word that you're saying, if you're just vocalizing, nobody cares whether it's oo or ah. I even forgot that it was an ah vowel, but it makes sense. It makes it a bit more intense. And it's like, oh, it's not just another 20 seconds of ooh because we wanted the song to be even longer. It's like, ooh, okay, I got it now. Ah, oh, he's saying something else now. Ooh, ah. And this also works if you are working with choir singers, or if you're arranging for an a cappella group, right? Where ooh, if a whole group of people does that, does not have the same effect as the ah vowel, even if you do it at the same volume. Especially from this pitch on, I'm going for a specific resonance tuning. That was pretty conscious too. It suits the ah vowel and the pitch, so it's not like I kind of forced it in there, but while it might be hard to hear, the strongest overtone is this fifth. Maybe if you listen for specifically that frequency, you can hear it. Maybe you're not sure whether you're just making it up in your mind. Probably you are hearing it. I'm gonna switch it on and off. If you had a spectrogram in front of you right now, you would see coming in and out. Why am I doing that? I'm not going for a lot of volume or, you know, a lot of efficiency on that quite falsetto note here, right? I would totally have to do it in opera. Maybe you could hear it now if you couldn't before. And then even on the high note, that would be a very typical classical tenor strategy. Why am I doing it here? Because it sounds beautiful. Without that, I'm searching for a totally non-resonant version of that falsetto. A bit constructed, maybe. Nobody would sing it like that, but I like how you can actually listen to two melodies at the same time, almost like an overtone singing. It's not overtone singing, obviously, but like, if you're actually bored at the end of the song, you just haven't listened closely enough. But maybe radio is just not your thing. Let's listen to more wild music again. Esultate from Verdi's Otello. And I have the aggressive glasses on again, this time the black version. So, that's an F. And the F is a tricky pitch in classical tenor singing because you kind of have to decide, do I close the timbre here? Do I keep it open? How open exactly? Am I right on the border between open and closed? Or am I going for a very spread and splatty? And you will hear a lot of tenors sing it Esultate covered. However, that will likely not be the loudest possible way. At least for me, it doesn't feel satisfactory here. We want it to be right? That's the first big thing, the lead role of the opera that is named after that specific lead role has to sing, and it's supposed to be kind of a war cry, and I don't want to cover it. So how open am I gonna do it? If I do very safe and stable open timbre, sounds too bright, almost too friendly in a way, even if I look evil. Somehow not really as aggressive as it could be. If I go for yell timbre, there's always the risk of the vibrato, especially if it's a big vibrato, tapping in and out of closed timbre accidentally and destabilizing. Let me try to show that. Can you hear the I did not plan on doing these. I was aware that they're likely to happen, and that's exactly what I mean. But, I didn't yodel like that. It just happens if you're so close to the border. If you open a tiny bit more, so it's not as likely to happen, you will have neither the power of this yell timbre nor the power of the very open one that we rejected for other reasons previously. You will have defeated the purpose of going for a lot of volume. That was stable and almost yell timbre, but not quite. Maybe on recording it works, but in reality you would not. You would actually go better if you went to close timbre, as discussed before. So what did I do in the recording here? I went for the risky and potentially yodely version. This one, right? Would that be the choice in a live setting if I had to sing this role? They would not let me. They don't really let very young people sing this because the saying goes that whoever sings Otello will have wasted all of their vocal potential afterwards, or even negatively affected their vocal health, to put it that diplomatically. I believe that's bullshit. I think it's just tricky to sing. It has many different, sometimes opposing challenges. But I sang this short part of it, and I went for the risky version. Not risky in the sense of vocal health, really. Risky in the sense of losing stability and sounding like shit. But the take I did there sounded good, I think. Now this higher pitch, that's gonna be very straightforward closed timbre, and it's high enough for it to sound good. Also, the music makes it climactic. It's the first high note here. It's not the highest, but so far it is. Especially since we go that low. Sepolto in mare. It's pretty low for a tenor, even though we're not at the absolute low point. But like this short minute of entrance, which also means you have to be good, if not great, from the very beginning on stage on. It's a pretty big tessitura here. Pretty challenging. On these E vowels, I have to cover them. It would be too shouty and take away from the actual climax that's going to happen later. But in order to make them cut through, I make them very bright and very speechy. Not the same kind of thing that I talked about earlier with Nessun Dorma, where we want the U and the E vowel to be very similar. No, right now we want the E to really cut. Something like this. I don't know where we are in terms of pitch. And then we're open timbre again on the Gloria. Okay. New highest note, but we can hear from the harmonies that this is not going to be the actual climax. So tension grows. Very well written music. Be natural. And there we have again the question, do we go for a stable closed timbre or a stable open timbre or the not so stable kind of seesaw thing that you could hear right now in my demo when you listen back to what I recorded. I'm more stable on the yell side. Yeah, but I'm wasting a tiny bit of volume there, I would actually say. It's not too much of a problem because I'm taking the open timbre pretty high. And I just had the actual climax happen. To be natural, right? Even though it's pretty short. But, yeah. Just a lot of stuff that you have to think about. And if you don't make a plan, if you just let your fate decide for you, that might actually be a bit tiring for you. Because now we're operating at maximum volume. And the really spread out vowel, I think that's exactly the one I wanted to avoid in the beginning. Esultate. But at the very end, we want this kind of aggression. No. And the vibrato, of course, is shamelessly just pulsing my belly. This is a dramatic tenor singing, okay? Now, the last three. Something completely different. I still haven't found what I'm looking for by U2. By the way, here's some U2 jokes. Bono. I don't remember the joke. Let me look on my Instagram. I already posted them. Oh no, here he is. Recycling jokes that he hasn't even come up with himself. Cringe. But not the most cringe moment of today's live stream. Bono and The Edge walk into a bar. The bartender says, "Oh, not you two again." This song is very interesting because it starts with a fade in. And, I mean, you could say this happens long before I actually start singing, so you could just skip right in. And then it doesn't make any difference, but I'm gonna be as bold as to say the way this song starts will have to influence the way I sing it. It definitely does influence the way Bono sings, even though, you know, Bono has his specific style of singing in general, but this is one of the early, I wanted to say style defining, but it's actually genre defining, not just U2, but you know other bands too. Of these early genre defining songs. So what exactly am I trying to say here? If the whole song has this huge dynamic range where it starts from nothing and you fade in, and of course you could just make your speaker louder so you hear the very first couple of seconds loud enough too, but you don't really do that because then it would be too loud later on, right? So you hear nothing in the beginning, then very little, and then more, and then more, and then the climactic louder moments. We want our singing to be just as dynamic as that too. Now, I have climbed highest mountains. My loudest point in this phrase is high, the high note on the word high. Pretty straightforward word painting here. That's a fuller metallic, if not full metallic overdrive. The symbol is high. The vowel gets modified either into the O direction or the E direction. I think I'm going into the O direction. Maybe you hear kind of an like quality here. That's fine too. But it has to be yell timbre. Otherwise it would not be a centered overdrive. And even if we did that, we would not get that huge dynamic peak. What's the quietest part of this phrase? Tens. the last split second of the last syllable. It might not be very obvious, but let me play it again. Highest mountains. I'm kind of slowing it down a bit for you to hear, but what I'm thinking is I'm going from 10 out of 10 volume to 3 out of 10. It's a pretty big dynamic range, even if I never really reach that 3 out of 10 and it actually stays at 4 before the s consonant that ends the syllable comes in or whatever. The way I would teach it and the way I'm thinking about it in the moment is like that. And then if only 50% of that actually makes it into the phrase, that's good. Mostly it's better than if I didn't think about it, because it's like, well, I can sing the whole thing at 5 out of 10. I have climbed highest mountains. It's boring. Doesn't suit the style. I have run through the fields. This was a bit more obvious. I have run through the... Now, in this case, the high note was curving, so it's not going to be as loud, but you can hear the distortion, you can hear a bit of strain. It is intense. The fields. And then we go back to almost falsetto. It's still a chest voice, but we're not that far away. We could transition there smoothly anytime. Feel back and forth, right? We want the potential for that dynamic range at least. This phrase is not as dynamic. Only to be with you. But we will repeat it. Only to be with you. So it serves a slightly different purpose. But now, as we've made that statement, we're gonna do the same thing all over again. I have crowed. Very loud, very quiet. I have scaled these city walls. Same thing. In the second phrase, the high note is closed timbre, so it's not gonna be as loud, but we have a bit of strain. It's very clear that we're going for the loudest possible on that vowel. These city walls, only to be with. Now the order of phrases is a bit different. Okay? Always that ebb and flow. And now this still, the I vowel, it could have been done much more efficiently. But I still, like that. Perfect resonance tuning, reduced density, reduced metallic, blah blah blah. Boring. But I still, we want a bit of strain. We want an imperfect resonance tuning. We're not trying to be very powerful here. We've done that in the verse already. We want the chorus of this song to be, well, not the calm part of the song, but the calmer, the less intense, the less euphoric part. Anticlimactic maybe, but very effective. And even within that, quite a big dynamic range, even if we're not going as loud. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I'm almost breathy at the end there, right? Now, same formula in the second verse. I have kissed. This is really loud. Does it have to be as loud? No, but it's more interesting if it's that loud. And we have the compression and all the other stuff in order to make the volumes in reality more uniform, more coherent. But the character stays there, right? So that's why I waste so much effort recording this thing like that. If I had to sing this one in a party cover band where nobody actually listens and, you know, it's only song 20 out of my 150 song set list. Okay. I have kissed honey lips See, I'd have to practice. Let's see. I have kissed. More bite. We're going CVT textbook formula. Overdrive. Honey lips. Okay. I have held hand of the, I don't even know the lyrics. Found the healing in a fingertips. Okay, would be quite easy. You know, even with the couple of nuances like I need the bite in overdrive, otherwise it will fall into neutral, as you could very clearly hear. It's not too complicated. It's, you know, it's a song you have to practice once or twice, and then it's pretty easy to sing if you have these basic skills. I did not choose to go the easy way. I chose to push into already powerful overdrive to get the most out of it with extra distortion and some push and some splitting here and there, and you know, and I can hear a very similar approach in Bono singing, right? Listen to that burn. I'm almost not even hitting the right pitch, right? Right now it was a bit flat. I might have tuned it up like 20 cent or something with Melodyne here, but it doesn't really matter. Even the flat version would have that kind of impact, right? Where it's like it burn. It's like almost not possible to sustain it. But thank God the syllable is only 1.5 seconds long. Right? Life or death. Burning desire. This time a bit shorter, but same intensity, right? Desire. Right after that, desire. Falsetto. This one's a bit tricky because the first time in the song we don't really have an open shoutable vowel in that place. We have the nasalized tongue. Tongue! So we could kind of have that push thing again. I didn't go for as much of that. I actually was like, okay, if this vowel doesn't like being shouted, I'm going to make a bit of a difference here. With the tongue of angels. Okay, so we're much closer to the efficient party band kind of realization here. But here, we do have the shoutable vowel. And I'm totally going overboard with it. I'm even not managing it cleanly until the end. Head of the devil. This is not just a yodel that I'm adding. Head of... Like this. I could do that. It's very easy. Kind of effective. No. What I'm doing here is even more true. Head of the... That's a pushed for ice cream almost. For a split second, right? It was one in the night. Same kind of thing as on the burn syllables. And very different here on the cold syllable. So warm is kind of muffled and pushy. And cold is technically precise. Kind of bright because of the vibe and everything. You know, you could say in terms of sound color, the warm one is warmer and the cold one is colder, but also in terms of emotional intensity, the warm is much more heartfelt and the cold is cold! Very easy, very straightforward. I can do that with a straight face. It was cold as a stone, oh, but I still haven't found... Boring. This one's not as strainy as before. The one before, still, was kind of like this, not a clean tone. Right now, still, we're a bit closer to efficient phonation, but even there, I'm not going for the easiest way to do it. I'm still using a bit more effort than necessary. I have a bit of Kermit going on. I have all these small pieces of sand in the machinery. I have all these small sabotagers that actually make for a bigger expression in the end. So they're not actually pieces of sand that you want to get rid of. They're not actually sabotaging my actual goal, which is expression. giant dynamic range as the instrumental forces me to deliver. Okay, last one. This one's interesting, but yes, I'm not going to the full overdrive thing. I'm kind of staying in neutral. Yes, the ball is getting more open and shouty, but the thing that happened accidentally a couple of minutes ago when I wanted to show you how easy it is to sing this song, where instead of this overdrive, I had this kind of break. I'm going for that now in this specific phrase. But yes, I'm still. Might I actually reach the pitch, or might I crack before? If I reach the pitch, am I gonna sustain it, or is it gonna just stop there? Am I gonna go sharp even? Yes, like that. I don't care, and it doesn't matter because we're expressing something else now. We're not trying to have the greatest power on the high note, or the loudest volume in search of a great dynamic contrast and all that. Right now, we're filling the same melodic idea with a very different intention. But yes, I'm still. See, this time it was flat, but it was the same expression as in the video. But yes, I'm still. See, flat again. But yes, I'm still. Not flat. But yes, I'm still. It cracked now. I'm not controlling any of that. I'm just realizing versions of the same idea on the level of expression. Not compression. There's no hypercompression here. There's a ton of digital compression on this one because of the dynamic contrast. But that was mostly a Freudian or Freudian. I guess he's a German. He was. Slip. Very subtle difference, but once you hear it, you will never unhear it. You broke the neutral with a tiny bit of Kermit. Bones! Overdrive. It's not, even though it's a similar range and almost the same ball, it's not the same coordination. It's not, you broke the bones! Or, you broke the bones! It's, you broke the bones! Right? We have, let me exaggerate it more. You broke the bone! We have a mode switch there. Dynamics. Full overdrive up there. Clean though. And a tiny bit of distortion on the repetition of my shame. Every single repetition that's in the song, worth it. Or even more than that, we want to make it inevitable. It has to be repeated because the second time we say it, it's more important. Or it means something different. Or the person you said it to hasn't understood it, so you want to be more insistent, you know? Fill it with meaning, right? Otherwise, it's just boring U2 song. See, leave it! That break was not controlled or, even planned. Right now, when I demonstrated it, I planned it. In the moment there, that was just what happened, and I don't know how many takes I did this song. 3 or 4, it wasn't actually that much. I picked that one because I liked it, right? But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't. That was the most struggly still. And you can kind of hear the sound color morph into almost a strangle. But it's expressive. And then we repeat the lyrics 2 more times, I think. But we change up the melody. We make it go down. We do not make it more interesting by, but I still doing stuff like that. We go down, but I still haven't found. Why do we do that? But letting go of the struggle? Is it accepting your fate, whatever it is? It's not completely free of struggle. Still, some creaking here. Haven't found. Some yodeling there. No, it's not relaxed. It's not, but I still. It's not that. What is it? Mode of fighting. From aggression to a softer, friendlier, well, I don't want to say more subtle, but less obvious confrontation, because it's still confrontational. It still has a big dynamic range. It still has all these little alleged pieces of sand that are going to sabotage the beautiful wedding performance version of this song, right? But I still haven't found what I ran out of air, right? So I have a big audible gasp. So there's a bit of fight here. I don't know if I can make it until the end, but I'm not completely powering through anymore, right? Haven't found what I'm looking for. It's almost as if right now we're not fighting for being heard anymore, like we would with the loud moments that then go back to the very quiet, so the contrast is bigger. It's almost as if we're fighting for sincerity of phrasing. I want this pitch to be important for all of the seconds that I'm sustaining it, right? I could do, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I could even do looking for, or looking for, or looking for. But it's not important. Why would I be doing that, right? What does it convey? Maybe you can hear something in that, but I don't really have an intention while I'm doing that. But I do have an intention when I'm doing looking for. And it might be hard to find the right words to describe it, but it is there, and I think it has the potential to touch more deeply than if you think of this mainly as a technical exercise here, right? And that kind of sincerity, or that kind of insistence on expression is there even after we took down the melody, even after we narrowed the range of dynamics a bit, even though it's still pretty big, you know? So that's what's very interesting to me about this song and this style of singing. The last two are going to be a very long one and a very short one. Let's do the very long one, which is Siegfried's And our first character out of two that we will hear in this one is Siegfried himself. In close timbre. And then open timbre. Okay? So in this case, we're not really trying to do as much with our voice. We're not trying to have all these small nuances that we talked about in the earlier classical stuff, or even right now the U2 thing, where you can talk about every piece of creaking and yodeling and blah blah blah. We're not doing as much here. This is dramatic tenor singing, German dramatic tenor, Heldentenor. So it's also a bit different from the Italian dramatic tenor singing in Otello. It's pretty straightforward. Your main goal is to survive the evening. I'm pretty glad I don't actually have to do this on stage. This is just my studio recording here. I believe the way I sing it would be loud enough. I believe the way I sing it would stylistically be adequate. more adequate even than some of the other people who are singing it at the moment. By the way, the blog post that I talked about is referencing not only this video but also going into detail amongst other topics about what I like about my favorite Siegfried, who I guess I can say it now. I didn't name anyone in the blog post, but it is Andreas Schager. I've seen him live several times. I will see it again next year. He's very loud, which is his main quality, but he also has other qualities, which if he didn't have them, probably would not suffice for an interesting 5 hours of Siegfried, let alone several performances of the same thing that I attended. I also went into detail about what I like about my most beloved Mime, who's going to be the second character. We're going to talk more about him in a minute. So there is definitely something to be said about the intricacies of the singing here. But let's be honest, all of these nuances are meaningless if you're either not audible or you cannot sustain it for long enough to sing this shit. So that's a kind of different context, more clear priorities. No dynamic range here. Was musstest du zerspringen? And now we continue. So schrein und schuf ich die Stadt. Not a very like nuanced or differentiated phrasing either. So schrein und schuf ich dich. It's like every single syllable, whether it's longer or shorter, has this slap of an onset. You could call it an accent, you could call it marcato. Doesn't really matter, because it's not really an expressive tool. Yes, it fits the role, otherwise it would be stupid to write an opera like this with such big orchestration and you know, having to listen for that shit for 5 hours. It works, it definitely works well. And I'm not saying it's just luck that it works well. Wagner was a great composer, even though not a very great human, and that's the reason I am wearing these Fuck Wagner t-shirts. Mainly also to piss off Wagner fans, because, you know, they're the most obnoxious subgroup of the overall already obnoxious opera fanatics. Umbrella. But anyway, I'm not doing these very aggressive impulses for mainly expressive reasons or anything. It's just what happens if you go for maximum volume on every single syllable. I didn't do it on the low pitch here. Im Tiegel. Because if you have that kind of impulse, the low pitch is going to be a bit tricky, unless you maybe have a much lower voice. If I try it right now with that impulse on the low pitch, Im Tiegelbrat, you can hear how girl. I didn't actually reach the pitch, right? In this moment, I prioritized being kind of on pitch over volume or expression. Well, we have more intense moments to come here. What are we gonna take out of these lyrics? Ho 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 hi ho hi. Oh no, I think it was a different order. Ho ho ha 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 ho hi. Hey. Oh yeah, I forgot. What we're gonna take out of this is I can be very loud at somewhat high pitches. It's not gonna go any higher than A4 in most of Wagner. But it's the highest note of the phrase. It's gonna repeat a couple of times, but like each time we want it to be climactic. And yeah, why try to insert lyrics here if everything we want to say, which is I'm powerful, I'm Siegfried, is already in the realization of the pitch itself. Such an aggressive style of singing. I love it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And it's risky insofar as that, and you can hear that when I try it right now. When you go for maximum volume, your shapes have to be very precise, and if they aren't, it's not just gonna crack a bit, but it's also gonna tire you out more quickly, which is, I guess, part of the reason why people are afraid of dramatic stuff, and especially of Siegfried, which is probably one of the most dramatic Wagner horrors, even. Let me try again, and if I succeed, I'm gonna tell you what I did with the shape. If not, I'm gonna shut up. I kind of succeeded, I would say. I want F2H3 timbre tuning on every covered, so close timbre note of this song. On A4, I was actually a bit sharp. Probably part of the reason why it didn't work the first time. This kind of fifth that I talked about earlier on. In order to get that, that has to be my vowel. Not ho-ho, not ha-ha, not ho-ho. Ho-ho! Doesn't sound like Wagner, it's not half as loud, even though I'm using the same effort. No, we have to have specifically that precise shade of the vowel. Aha! There it is. And then blase. Sorry. Interesting harmonies, right? As we go lower, we have to close the vowel more. And darken it more. Right? Closing would refer mostly to where's my first resonance, how close am I to covering, basically, or not. Brightness versus darkness would refer mostly to the second resonance, even though other resonances have an influence on that too. But if we think specifically about the vowel, our second resonance, the one you hear kind of do these if I do that, or the one that you hear when you snap against your cheek like that, as opposed to against your throat, which would give you the pitch of the first resonance. The second resonance is our main controlling lever for brightness or darkness of the vowel. We want to change both sound color and openness, so the first two or the lowest two resonances. Gradually, as we go lower, it's pretty precise. If you don't understand the word I'm talking about, just take this out of it. It's not easy. And now I open up, right? If I don't have that precise timbre tuning, or if I'm losing overall clarity while I'm making everything more closed and dark on the way downward and losing volume, while having to be loud, I am gonna overpush, right? So this is the tricky part about Wagner. And the way I specifically sing, you could probably get away with singing it less dramatically. You could... Or even in Technique 1. You could probably sing it more the way I sing my mime. You're gonna hear a very, very big contrast in sound color. I guess, anyone who's loud enough will be cast as a Siegfried. But my point is, if you don't have a naturally louder instrument, I hate that. Instrument is one of my bad E words. That's just not gonna be the most efficient way to be loud enough. Right? So. I'm spitting the T. Video now, you don't see me singing anymore with my fancy glasses and my Fuck Wagner shirt, but you see the beginning of my blog post or essay or whatever you want to call it. Slightly shortened version in this video. My favorite Siegfried started out as a lyric tenor in operetta and Mozart opera context before becoming one of the world-leading Helden tenors. So that's Andreas Schager I'm talking about. And I'm kind of fanboying over him. But not just for the sake of fanboying, I'm actually trying to make a point. Let me skip a bit. We have a variation on the melodies. Baum es Kohle. And no time, no capacities for subtle bel canto phrasing. Baum es Kohle. No, we're not doing any of that. We're Baum. We're just doing that, right? We're trying to be loud. Nothing else is important. Getting the rhythm right is not that easy. Glüht sie hell und hell. That's probably one of my favorite parts of this. In springenden Funken blüht sie auf. Ho, hi, ho, 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 hi. It's like a lot of jumps. Da 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 da. And even hard to remember the exact melody if you're not singing it at full volume. You know what I mean? It's like the music might seem simple or even like stupid. Because the performance kind of has to be this caveman mode. But no, it's actually not that easy to remember. Nessun Dorma is much easier to remember and easier to sing, in my opinion. At least to me. But like, I can see how this might be a tiny bit more universal than just, you know, due to my personal vocal journey. The point I'm making in my essay here is the fact that my favorite Siegfried has not started like this. He's actually evolved there, and we don't know whether you could just jump back without any preparation or like cross-tearing or anything, but the fact that we've heard a range of expressions of volumes of Fachs from this guy implies that we don't just have a freak of nature who gets to freely sing at twice the volume level that us mere mortals have at our disposal. I very much have reasons to believe that my favorite Siegfried is playing by the same rules as we all do, namely the laws of nature. Read the essay. Whether you read it in the video or the full blog post, I don't care, but read it. It's smart. It's well written. I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I'm not a writing teacher. I'm a singing teacher. I would not pat myself on the back for my singing or my teaching too much. I mean, I only share stuff that I'm satisfied with. So if you're interested in what I think about my own performances, I like them. But I'm pretty proud of this essay here. I'm not a writer. I wouldn't know whether it's actually good, but I believe it's really, really good, given that I wasn't sure whether it was gonna be any good at all, and I believe more people should read it. And I'm not just saying this in order to cause a shitstorm from opera fanatics, who I will probably offend with some of the more controversial statements in that thing. But I'm not just doing that for whatever clickbait reasons. If I did, that would be a pretty bad job because no one's reading it so far. I generally have not one but several important points in this one, and I mean, these points would be great even if it wasn't well written. But it is well written. It's gonna be fun to read it. Read it. It's a kind of jumpy phrasing that we have which fits the lyrics very well. So the expression is in the writing already. But now let's go to Mime. And Mime is a very, very different character.
Schmiedet das Schwert und Fafner fällt das seh ich nun deutlich voraus. Und Fafner fällt
That's not a low larynx.
das seh ich nun deutlich voraus.
It sounds very twangy, but actually the amount of twang is not different from what I'm doing in Siegfried. It's really just a different larynx position and a different mouth shape and probably other small sound color influencing parameters. But yes, big voice with a big vocal tract for Siegfried and
Small voice with a small vocal tract for
the dwarf. That is Mime.
Hort und ringt im Harst.
And very over-the-top articulation. If you're not German, if you don't speak German, that's gonna be harder to hear, but
Hort und ringt im Harst. Wie erwerb ich mir den Gewinn?
it's not very straightforward to speak like this. But no, I'm not actually the only one interpreting the role of Mime like this. This is a very standard way of singing this role, impersonating this character. That I don't know who started it. I don't know if people at the time of Wagner himself were doing it as extremely as that, but that's definitely the role, right? This is like if you are gonna play any kind of witch, it doesn't even have to be the Wicked Witch of is it the East? Elphaba. In Wizard of Oz, I'm not talking about the musical where she is not that wicked, actually, right? Spoiler, I'm talking about
I'll get you, my pretty.
that kind of thing. Very over-the-top, very stereotypical role. We have that same kind of over-the-top, stereotypical depiction of the evil, greedy dwarf, a Jew caricature by absolute asshole, well, anti-Semitic dickhead Wagner. We have that same kind of fairy tale straightforwardness here in the depiction of Mime.
Wie erwerb ich mir den Gewinn? Mit Witz und List.
By the way, the volume
Mit Witz und List gewinn ich beides und kehre heil mein Haupt.
is pretty loud too, even though it doesn't sound big because of the small vocal tract. But we know that size of the vocal tract is not size of the voice in terms of volume, right? Now, you're gonna hear the contrast between Mime and Siegfried because they overlap each other here.
Gewinn ich beides und berge heil mein Haupt.
Very, very different sound color. Okay? Now I'm talking a bit about my favorite Mime, who is Dan Karlström. And then I guess we can skip to the last third of the whole thing. Meanwhile, in the essay I've talked about voice type and vocal fach, about my vocal journey, about a general toxic atmosphere, problematic social dynamics, ridiculous hierarchies in the opera world in general, but specifically classical vocal pedagogy. I have a couple of stories, my own stories, but also other people's anecdotes, professional singers, anonymous stories about abuse of power, pretty extreme stuff, and I know that none of it is made up, because I didn't ask people to come up with crazy stories for this thing. People have told these stories to me before, and I was like, actually, I'm now gonna write an essay on this. If you want, you can write this thing down. And now that it's out, I'll ask people to contribute their stories too. So if you have any of these stories, if your classical teacher was being weird, if your musical director tried to teach you how to sing, even though you are the singer and they're not, even if your accompanist gave you a lecture on what kind of repertoire you should sing. You know, all these weird things that happen. And that really limit classical singers, especially opera singers, in their flexibility, even if it's just emotional flexibility, to do whatever they want because they're doing music for fun. Yes, they're also doing it for the money, but hopefully there's still a bit of fun in it, and that's where they started, right? They didn't start at, age 25, like, oh, I'm gonna have to gain a lot of money. What am I gonna become? I'm gonna become an opera singer. Nobody does that. Unless it's also a lot of fun, but you're not gonna make a lot of money, sorry. If you make a decent amount of money, you're gonna be very lucky and work very, very hard for it. It's not gonna be a fun job. That's what I say, at least. I'm very happy with my job as a teacher, by the way. I think it's not just that you make more money teaching singing than singing itself, on average. It's also that, while none of these cultural jobs are valued as much as they should be valued, in my opinion, I think just the experience of teaching a handful of singers every day, or no matter whether you have just 10 singers in your studio and then all of your slots are filled up, or if you have several hundred singers per year, as I do, because of online teaching, the overall experience is more thankful, if that makes sense to you. It's like, no matter whether you're working with professionals or semi-professionals or beginners or colleagues or whatever, you can always see and hear very directly the influence you have on their journey. And earlier on I said, well, the teacher is not solely responsible or the one to take all the blame or all the the benefits of the student's successes or whatever you want. It's like, yes, this is true on the one side, but on the other side, you do have an influence on your students as a teacher. If you don't, you're not a good teacher, and your student shouldn't continue to come to you, right? And the students doing is, all of their exercises. They're doing most of the work. They are the ones who picked the teacher. So like, the student is ideally, and this kind of teaching relationship, the dominant one, the one who is in charge of all the big decisions and so on. But of course, the reason they are going to a teacher, the reason they are consulting me or anyone else for technical or musical or even like language and style coaching purposes, is that we can have valuable input. And that is because we are experienced and knowledgeable and blah, 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 but it's also because we have just a separate set of eyes and ears, and, it's sometimes just helpful to consult anyone else, even if they're not a certified teacher or something, right? So you can ideally see in real time and hear differences, ideally improvements in their performances. And with making music, you can hear in real time your own, well, your performance obviously, but like your own musical ideas coming to shape. You can hear stuff that you practice a lot and that works well or well enough, at least in the moment, and it's like, yes, it was totally worth practicing this shit. You can hear spontaneous things, especially in more improvised music, or in just unplanned moments where something nice happens or something weird happens, but then you kind of save it with just the intuition of someone who's in the state of flow, whatever. Anyway, I don't want to ramble too long about this, but like, you do have these positive experiences. It can feel like the nicest job ever, but my experience as a musician and the experience of lots of other musicians that talk to me is that the negative aspects of the job tend to outweigh the positive aspects, at least from time to time. Some people stop making music, or stop at least making music for money, because of all the other shit they have to do that is not performing or not writing or not recording. You know what I mean? The fun parts are making the music, but that's only a small fraction of it. In teaching singing, let's say more than 50% of what I'm doing is actually the fun part, namely the teaching itself, whether it's in private lessons or workshops or whatever, live streams for YouTube, right? So anyway, all of that is better than being an opera singer and having to deal with this obnoxious shit that is, for some reason, the default rather than the exception in opera. Read my blog post.
Lustig lachst du mich an, stellst du auch redlich und
No, we're not in da ba 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 this thing anymore, but we're bum 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 in a different kind of mood. And we have our climactic A4s again, and we have this jumpy kind of melodic writing. But now, the tempo's different, and we have less of an obligation to be on pitch. Hear me out. These melodic lines, they are just relatively random musical depictions of yelling, of cheering, of any kind of primal voice utterance. They aren't random insofar as that they stick to a certain scale. Wagner's not atonal in his composing style usually, but nobody cares if this is actually a major third and then the tritone, or nobody fucking cares. It doesn't even matter whether you do it in open or closed tab, or the only thing that matters is your A4 needs to be spot on, and if it's not spot on right away in terms of pitch, because you slide or land too sharp, that doesn't happen as often in Wagner singers, but theoretically it would work. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you end up on that pitch. Like if I froze time, we would have to be on A4. And we need, of course, the power of A4. If we're a bit sharp and we have the power of almost a B flat, okay, even better, but it's like it's like you can conduct this kind of music if you just understand what's the purpose of these notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7! 6, 7. The 7 is the most important one, and the other ones are just jumping around, kind of, right? I'm simplifying a lot here, but then again, I'm not really simplifying a lot. I'm just breaking it down to what I believe is the most important part about this. It's like, yes, of course he could practice. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose is hi ho ha ho ho ha. And if you're completely um, rhythmically tied and precisely on pitch, and you have very uniform sound color from low to high range, but you're not shouting these written down shouts. You're not singing the right music, right? Listen to lots of interpretations of this. A lot of people understand what this is about. I still try to be somewhat on pitch here, because it's a recording, and I don't want to have these 2 or 3 moments where I'm like, oh, this could have been more on pitch. I want to listen to this and not get irritated by small details that aren't supposed to irritate me. But essentially, in practice, it doesn't really matter which pitches you sing. Now, this is different. Durch Glut und Hammer gelegt. We have this diminished chord. And while you could say, well, diminished, it's supposed to be just dissonant, and the chords are going to change very quickly. Like this all the time. We have to be more on pitch here. That's just like 1 or 2 bars later. Different priorities suddenly. We have to be more on pitch here, because if we're not, it sounds like we're still yelling, but we don't have the phrasing for yelling. Durch Glut und Hammer gelegt. Right? If I yell that durch Glut und Hammer gelegt es me, I have to sustain those yells too long for them to be affordable without good planning. And that's where we go back to the maximum volume kind of thing, where in the beginning, no, 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 every single pitch has to be boo, 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 as big as possible. We still want to be as big as possible, but when we just yell, and it doesn't really matter whether we are hitting an F sharp or G or kind of something between, or it starts actually sharp but then it slides down flat, when we have to be on pitch here, because we cannot yell it on a sustained kind of duration, precision of the vowel becomes very important again. Okay, so what would I do here if I notice that I lose power on some of these syllables, or maybe even it cracks, or it creaks, or whatever? Glot und ha! Oh, both of these are vowels, like an overdrive. I would say I'm in this hypercompressed edge, but the strategy of yell timbre is the same. So I'm not doing durch Glut und Hammer, I'm doing durch Glot und Hammer. Okay? Very important vowel modification. Now, that's going to be close timbre. This is F2H4 timbre tuning. Why not F2H3 as we had before with the because right now we don't have an or kind of darkened A vowel. We have glückt, and glückt is not supposed to sound like glückt. I rather have it sound like glickt. Now this, again, if you're not a German native speaker, or even someone like French or Danish native speaker, where you have this number of vowels, you might not even hear the differences between those nuances, or not understand why they are important. But in order for this to be an Ö vowel, we have to go for the brighter variation of the vowel in order to hit the right kind of resonance tuning here, which is F2H4, so the second formant or second vocal tract resonance, synchronizing with the fourth harmonic or third overtone or fourth multiple of the fundamental frequency for the nerds. Then the next one is.
Mit starken Schlägen schlägt.
So this one is just a semitone lower. First one was. No. We went down, and I could have just closed and darkened a bit more. And it would totally work as a variation of my Streckfaust. But no. I don't want to lose any power, so I'm going to open up this G4. It's pretty high pitch to open the timbre on, but... Well, we're yelling. It's Wagner. Why not? But now, we covered again that same pitch. First off, it's an oval, so that one, that wouldn't sound like the word rot. It would sound like rot. It's okay, not intelligible anymore. But sham afterwards, that's an aval. I could totally open that because I've done that with the aval too, which is not as open as the aval, right?
Rote Scham werde kalt.
Yes, I could do that. I will open up avals at that pitch later on, and even before that, I think, in that whole recording. But right now, I was already there in my close timbre oval. So why not just put the ah in the same place? If it's not supposed to be louder or more important or anything, then that oval.
Spinne die rote Scham.
That's close timbre, covered. Sha rather than sha.
Werde kalt und hart wie du.
Aha. And now we have the aval, hart. And the word hart means hard. Pretty easy. So, for a hard timbre on the syllable hard, why not just open it? Now we have a reason to. And it's also not that we have to recalibrate a lot because we went down and we took the open timbre up. So that's easier to do than rote Scham, werde kalt und hart wie du. Right? We're yelling again. Yelling is easy and effective.
Kalt und hart wie du kannst. Hei ho, hei ho.
And now we have these written yells again.
Hei ho.
I almost hit a C5 right now, right? But it doesn't really matter, even though the pitch that's written is A4 high. As long as I'm yelling, as long as it's loud enough, as long as I can make it through. Jump.
Hei ho, 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 ho.
Now, Mima has his last kind of moment.
In der Bruder schuf den schimmernden Reif, in den gezaubert zwingende Kraft.
Lots of syllables. And by the way, if you read the original sheet music, the rhythm is not that straightforward. It's not dum bum 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 bum, as you would suspect with this kind of shuffled rhythm. It's actually dem, der Bruder schuf den schimmernden Reif. It's like going back and forth between shuffled and 16th notes. It's like it's very counterintuitive. I try to be as close as possible to the sheet music, not because it matters really, not because a lot of other mimes do that. They don't care because it doesn't matter. Just because I was being a bit perfectionist again, a bit ambitious about, doing the best I can.
Reif, in den gezaubert
Dem der Bruder schuf den schimmernden Reif, in den gezaubert zwingende Kraft.
Das helle Gold, das Herrscher macht. Cannot even remember the fucking lyrics. I would hate to be an opera singer, even if the opera world wasn't toxic, because I'd have to remember all those meaningless lyrics. It's like, generally, everything that has been said in those 15 minutes could have been said in 3 minutes. But it wouldn't have been as much fun.
zwingende Kraft, das helle Gold, das Herrscher macht. Ihn hab ich gewonnen, ich wollte sein.
Hear that? Gewonnen, ich wollte sein. I'm not being... It's like... It's supposed to be G, A flat. Perfect cadence. No. Ich wollte sein. I'm being totally sharp here. I could be flat. I could be accidentally on pitch. It does not matter. And this is a moment where I'm not actually going for the most precise intonation that's written in sheet music the way I'm going for the precise rhythms. Because here I would give up expression if I try to be on pitch. The expression is better if we're not singing this, if we're yelling it. Well, technically there's almost no difference. It's like a couple of cents of intonation that make the difference, right? Maybe absence or presence of vibrato.
Ich wollte sein.
I could even be less precise with the rhythm here if that made it even more expressive. But I guess, slowing it down, wollte sein, doesn't actually do that much. So I didn't choose to do that here, but you get the point. It's like the push and pull of dynamics that we had in U2, of literally chest versus head that I did in my Nude cover or whatever. It's a different push and pull here, right? There always has to be push and pull. There always has to be tension and release, dissonance and consonance, whatever kind of way you create interesting music, right? But it's not going to be the same formulas every time. Now.
Gewonnen, ich wollte sein.
Lots of Silben now.
Albrecht selbst, der einst mich fand, zu Zwergen floh, jetzt bin ich ihn nun, als Nebel Fürst, fahr ich dann nieder, gehorchen soll mir alles gehen.
Ah! That's open timbre, that's almost belting.
Gehorchen soll mir alles her.
And it's very, very wild and not very calm. Right? And that's the character of Mime. Bit of distortion here. You can hear that in other Mimes too. Funny rhythmical game between ba, 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 voice and, well, percussion. In this case, it's supposed to be the forging kind of noise. Overlapping of Mime and Siegfried. Same pitch, and that's interesting. Very bright from Mime and pretty dark from Siegfried. And then we have that same thing a couple of minutes later on A4. Let me see if I can find the right thing. By the way, I believe actually this whole instrumental is a bit sharp. Because I think it's kind of in between of A and B flat. So we have Mime.
Höchste Alben walten es
Super bright. I think that was even open timbre. A4, completely crazy. The opposite of what Pavarotti will tell you that a classical tenor has to do in order to be a true classical tenor, blah, blah, blah. And then, at the same time, Siegfried with the biggest possible A4. Right? But not too big to reproduce it a couple of times. To having had it reproduced before that and then to do it a couple more times even within the last minute. Okay? From the beginning has changed to something has happened. It only took us 15 fucking minutes. Now, after all of this slow, dramatic,
Dort lagst du in Trümmern dort.
phrasing, now we have a bit of coloratura. After 15 minutes of this, well, actually much longer because this is only the ending of the first act, and the whole opera is going to be 5 hours. Jetzt leucht. I cannot even do it. An octave lower. Jetzt leucht. Right? It's almost like Baroque. Großer Herr, starker König. Jetzt leuchtest du trotzig und hehr. Pretty hard to do that after all that, just power. And most tenors actually don't do it, but I was being perfectionist. Is it so important for the expression? Probably not, but it's nice. We have this overlap again. Hey, Mime! Very funny. And they share the same pitches. Das by Mime and by Siegfried. It's so fun to compare these timbres, right? Wer hätte denn das? Schlage den vor! Pretty interesting. Small, big. Both are loud. And now this is probably the most important part of this whole thing here. The final A4. And now it's not the root note of the chord, like... But it's... Well, actually, it is the root note of the chord, but the chord is not our tonic. It's our dominant chords. So schneidet Sieg, which means we are in a slight tension. It's not as dissonant anymore, like the that we had a dozen of times here, billions of times, I should say. It's pretty straightforward. This, but it only ever releases into BAM! And the release is so important that we draw out this thing for another like 20 seconds. Bam bam. Okay, that's only the ending of the first act. And nothing has happened yet in terms of story or anything, right? We have characterized the main guy, who's powerful, Siegfried, and the, I guess, antagonist, if you will, which is greedy, small, Mime. Also his not so much father figure, psychologically very interesting if you want to interpret that, which would be a benevolent interpretation. Again, likely half of that in Wagner's original intent was just anti-Semitism. But that kind of last climactic tension before the even more climactic release needs to be loud, long, ideally heroic in timbre still, which is not easy on an eval. In technique 2, so hypercompressed the way I do all of these. Siegfried Schwert! It's totally possible. And if you listen to Andreas Schager, my favorite Siegfried, especially the kind of shortened version that he does with this open air orchestra kind of thing, he almost sounds like a musical theater actor there. So schneidet sie! The larynx is in the sky, at least compared to the very, very dark mid-range. But it's effective, right? Other Siegfrieds will be a bit darker, or will not hold it as long, or will, slide, yell it more than sing it. It all works, but it has to be more than just So schneidet Siegfrieds Schwert, the bel canto version, right? In my opinion. Otherwise, it's kind of a bit disappointing. In technique 1, which is, by the way, the one that Andreas Schager uses. He's not hypercompressing. This is much harder for me, especially because of the vowel. If I show you, so schneidet Siegfried, it gets a bit muffled, okay? And even if I twang more and if I allow my larynx to rise more, yeah, it's just not the same power that I get, right? Even compared to a very easy hypercompressed technique 2 thing, where I don't push for the highest possible volume yet, the ringiness of it will just be more convincing. So that's pretty tricky to do, but you know, there must be a way to figure it out. Andreas Schager obviously has also found a way to do it, so I'm gonna keep practicing this shit. And last call to read my blog post. I do talk in depth about my vocal journey there, and why exactly it's harder in Technique 1 versus Technique 2, and how this all relates to this whole social dynamic and shit. I wasn't sure whether recording Siegfried's Forging song would be a good idea. It's too long for people to watch the whole thing, even if there's an essay in between that they're supposed to read. It's not the ideal content for social media, and again, I'm doing this for fun and not for social media. And you know, recording 15 minutes of music for fun, let's say you really have to love the music in order for it to be fun, and not just a thing of, okay, I've recorded the first minute now, let's stop it here, or I've recorded the last minute of it, so I have the climactic Siegfried's Schwert moment, let's fuck all of that, the other stuff that happens before. But no, I do love the music so much that I did make it through. And that I did also end up writing this pretty long essay and posting about it and urging people to read it dozens of times. I do just love this music. Even though I hate Wagner, I do love opera in general, even though at least half of the opera people are, yeah, just crazy. And yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for less toxicity in both the opera world in general and specifically the way we make Wagner productions, the way we keep Wagner interesting, something that generally brings positive things into the world, or continues to do so, and ceases to bring negative stuff into the world. Oops. You get the point. Last one of the day. This one's a short one. You suffered by Napalm death. Great song. What am I doing here, technically? Let's do a detailed analysis of this. I'm doing a false chord scream. So, my true vocal folds are grunting. My false vocal folds are constricting. My arytenoids are rumbling. If I only did that, I guess that would suffice, but it's not exactly the sound I'm getting there. I have a funny tongue shape too. It's almost a pig squeak, but a bit darker. You could say it's a kind of guttural. Okay? Still not the sound I'm getting there, though. What is the secret ingredient in my... Maybe you can see it. I have the tongue in this kind of asymmetrical shape, and if I blow enough air, this cheek will start flapping. Not enough yet. There's exactly the sweet spot where it starts, and now we just need to keep up the movement as long as the syllable goes, which means it's quite a high airflow, which is quite hard to have if you want all of these tissues to vibrate, for which you have to constrict them. So it's not easy to do it, especially to sustain it long, but it worked on the one take that I did for this thing. And by the way, the take you see there is actually the one I recorded. I thought it was a bit funny to leave in the, stuff right before and after. This is how my recordings looked. I went to my phone. This is all recorded with this phone and another older phone that I have, two perspectives. And I go there and I click on record, and then I click on play the backing track, and then I do this. And if it's a lip sync, the vocals are already part of the backing track. If it's not a lip sync, like with this one, it's just me doing this into the mic, and then stopping the recordings and evaluating whether it was good enough or not. And yeah, in this case, it was one take. In the case of some older covers of the last 2 years, it was also just one or maybe 1.5 takes where I repeat some phrases, or I have two versions to choose from. Both work well, and then I go with the first or whatever. But also, as I said, for the high C and Di Quella Pira, which, by the way, after 4 hours of just demonstrating all kinds of different things and talking, which is even more tiring, potentially, than singing to me, still works very well, right? So it's like all of these things, even the pushed moments that I demonstrated for you, even the fucked up moments that I demonstrated, some of them consciously, some of them unconsciously or unplanned, none of that tires me out enough to not give you a nice C5. So this is a sign that you can do forbidden stuff. You can push for too much volume, for too much airflow. You can, do these things that are sometimes accurately and sometimes inaccurately or unfairly deemed inefficient or unhealthy even. You can do these things if you have a home base, if you know where to go, if you don't have the extra energy or the extra focus or whatever to afford these imperfections that actually make it more perfect musically, right? So that was my stream. That concludes this year's work. I thought I'd have to do a lot more like bookkeeping and then all of this tax shit. I hate it. That's, let's say, the 30 or 40% of not so cool stuff that you have to put up with if you teach singing or if you do anything as a freelancer, I guess. But it's totally worth it. I love teaching, I love singing, I love music, I love you. And before I actually stop the stream, let's just look into the chat. I get some positive reinforcement for my rant on classical teaching. We do have some potential for this one being used in beatboxing. True. We will probably find stuff like this already somewhere in music. Like when I first discovered hypercompressed splitting, I was like, okay, I'm the first one to use it. And then I found out Phil Minton exists. When I found this kind of bubble splitting, I was like, nobody has a term for that. Yeah, beatboxers are using it, and they have a term for it. Beatboxers have terms for everything. Much better terms, much more precise terms. Not necessarily like etymologically, but like no beatboxer will have doubts over the difference between throat bass and vibration bass. Oh, that was a shitty demo. Well, they are also very good at making these sounds. That's even worse than being good at naming them, right? Jumping from first to second subharmonic, in this case, distortion versus rattle, right? There would be debates over whether this is distortion versus rattle, or people would be confused if I tell them about subharmonics in a purely rock and metal context. But beatboxers, they have no problem hearing these things at all. Throat bass versus vibration bass, chest bass, vocalized chest bass. It's like, yes, of course, I can come up with the same kind of resolution in rock and metal vocals, or just non-beatbox context vocal effect terminology, where I say, this is my growl, and this is my voiceless growl or unvoiced growl. Well, for them it's the other way around. Is the standard one, and is the vocalized, so voiced version of this. It's like people will accuse you of being nerdy, too heady, too cognitive, too disconnected from the practical reality of singing, if you come up with a somewhat detailed framework. Except if you're a beatboxer, then everybody agrees that detailed frameworks are potentially very helpful, and you can zoom in and out depending on how much resolution you want. And I think we, as a whole vocal community, can learn a lot from beatboxers. Good. Last chance for questions. No questions coming in. So all of the questions that you have and have failed to put in the chat in time, you will now have to post as comments under this live stream as soon as YouTube puts it online as a video. I'm very happy to answer all of your questions. One last question just came right in. How was my year overall? And the answer is stressful and good. Not good and stressful, but stressful and good. I'll try to have mostly good and not so stressful 2026. I will probably not teach less, but maybe do less workshops. At least organize less workshops. Maybe it will turn out to be an even higher number, but I'll try to not plan so much work, because there's always more work than the work you plan. And yeah, that was an interesting year in order to figure out what exactly is a good amount of work shops, in brackets, overall work, but specifically the workshop topic, because I haven't been doing workshops for very long. My first workshop was in 2022. It was quite spontaneous. I jumped in for Alex Celeste, who didn't get visa access to Germany, so within a couple of days I had to come up with my whole rough vocal effects presentation. That's how it started, and that, yeah, it's not even 4 years ago. And then the next year I've done a handful, and then in 2024 I have done, I think, almost 20, and this year it's even more. So yeah, after roughly 75 workshops in total, is that correct? I'm not sure, I might be mixing up numbers here. I think it was 75 opera visits, not workshops, but pretty high number already now. I think I'm gonna tone it down a bit and see if maybe half or 2/3 of that feel a bit less stressful, because workshops are totally fun, but driving around and preparing new topics and just organizing registration and booking, blah blah blah, all of this shit, and then maybe actually not making enough money to compensate for the day where you could not teach 3 lessons in your room, right? It's like, it's good, it's fun, but it also has to make sense in terms of energy and money and so on. Anyway, that's my answer to the last question of the stream, and with that, I will wish you a happy new year. Don't drink too much, don't drink too little. You don't have to drink alcohol, but you have to drink something. Otherwise, you dehydrate, and in that case, your voice will start being more sensitive. Bye-bye.